Glenn, thanks very much indeed. The Conservatives look set to be the biggest party. Remember 8 hours ago we had an exit poll and there was a bit of scepticism about it, in which I undoubtedly joined, but it seems perhaps it was on the right sort of lines. Let's move along behind the party leaders here. This is the updated forecast based upon the fact that now, of course, we have more than half the results in. It looks as if David Cameron, there he is, we're forecasting now 325 seats. He's won his seat in Witney, one of those, but we reckon 325 seats based upon modifying that exit poll with the results that are coming in. Now, you actually need 326 to have an overall majority, 323 if you discount the Speaker and deputies. So David Cameron is going to be Prime Minister. He may have an overall majority, he may not. He may be able to govern purely with the support of the DUP in Northern Ireland. The next guy, Ed Miliband, we're forecasting 232 seats for the Labour Party. That's down on the night, largely down to the next individual. Nicola Sturgeon's SNP, we're forecasting now 56 seats. Not the 58 that was in the original exit poll, but my guess is Nicola Sturgeon can probably live with that. And many of those seats taken from the Labour Party. But Labour also losing some seats in England and not gaining enough to counter the Scottish effect, not gaining enough to make it look like a decent night for them. Liberal Democrats, Paddy Ashdown was in hat-eating mode at 10. His hat's safe. It's 12 we forecast for the Liberal Democrats. We reckon that UKIP take 2 and the Greens also featuring perhaps but with 1 seat. They started the night with 1 seat. A range of others, 19 primarily, of course, from Northern Ireland and Plaid Cymru. So there we are. It looks like that's the BBC forecast based upon the results insofar, modifying the exit poll. David Cameron's going to be the Prime Minister.
He's going to be the Prime Minister, and as Brian says, he may not need to continue his coalition with the Liberal Democrats. They, as Brian was reporting, are having a rotten night. Let's go to Bradford West for the declaration there and see how Respect's George Galloway has done. That result is imminent. The candidates lining up on the stage. The returning officer already in her place. No sign of George Galloway himself, though.
That's the other gentleman.
Here he comes. He won this, of course, in a by-election in spectacular fashion. But can he hold it at this general election?
He's staying... Oh, sorry. Apologies, I didn't see that. OK. I, Suzanne Hemingway, the Acting Returning Officer for the Bradford West Parliamentary General Election, give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate is as follows. Harry Booter, UK Independence Party, 3,140. George Galloway, Respect George Galloway, 8,557. George Grant, Conservative Party, 6,160. Alan Griffiths, Liberal Democrats, 1,173. Celia Hickson, Green Party, 1,085. Theresa Hurst, English Democrats, Putting England First, 98. James Kirkcaldy, Independent, 100. Nazim Shah, Labour Party, 19,977. And I do hereby declare that Nazim Shah is duly elected.
That's a big win for Labour in Bradford West. Women's rights campaigner Nazim Shah has unseated Respect MP George Galloway, or now former Respect MP George Galloway. He's been a parliamentarian in Glasgow, in London and in Bradford West, but he's out of the House of Commons now. There's the result in Bradford West, a Labour win. Nazim Shah with 19,977 votes, defeating Respect's George Galloway with 8,557. The Conservatives third, UKIP fourth, Lib Dems fifth and the Green Party in sixth place there. A majority for Labour of 11,420 on a turnout of 64% in Bradford West. 50% of the vote going to Labour, 21% to Respect, 15% to the Conservatives. Labour vote up 4 points on 2010, Respect up 18, the Conservatives down 16. UKIP up 6, Lib Dems down 9. There's the swing from Labour to Respect of 7%. That is compared to the 2010 result where Respect weren't actually standing. So I'm not sure that's a very meaningful swing to share with you, but we've shared it with you anyway. Please forgive us. Let's cross now to Dingwall and speak with Danny Alexander, the Liberal Democrat, who's lost his Inverness seat to the SNP. Commiserations. Why weren't you able to hold on in these circumstances?
Well, it's been a very tough election, and look, a lot of us have been swept away by this tidal wave of nationalism that's taken over many constituencies in Scotland, and we all have to reflect on that in a sense. You know, I'm proud of what I've done for this constituency over the past 10 years and what I've done for the country over the last 5 years. I fought a very positive campaign, and I'm grateful for the support that I received, but it wasn't enough. And there it is. Drew Hendry's now elected, and good luck to him.
You talk about a tidal wave of nationalism, but Liberal Democrats, including some very high-profile figures, are losing their seats across the UK. Is there a sense in which your role in government has meant that you are defeated by Labour and SNP candidates in some seats, and in others people think, well, they were in bed with the Tories, we might as well just have the Tories?
There may be some of that. I think that, I mean, in this constituency, certainly, the number of votes that I received was very similar to the number of votes I received in 2010. But as I say, that wasn't enough to win, and that's deeply disappointing. But I think that as Liberals and Liberal Democrats, we should hold our heads high in terms of what we've achieved in the country. But clearly, we have a lot of rebuilding to do. As John Thurso said at the count earlier, you know, the flame of Highland liberalism will keep burning, and our job is to make it burn brighter in the years to come.
And in terms of rebuilding, it may be that David Cameron doesn't need your support, but would you want the Liberal Democrats to come out of government and be an opposition party in order to rebuild?
Well, look, in the end, that's a matter for those people who have been elected. I haven't been elected. They will have to decide that. But I would have thought that with you know, quite a small number of MPs having been elected, I don't know what the final tally will be, that they'll want to think very carefully before taking that step. But that's a matter for those who've been elected. I know Nick Clegg's going to talk again later this morning about that and about his own views about the future. So I think we should, and I want to hear what he has to say and let him speak.
OK, thanks very much for talking to us, Danny Alexander at the Count in Dingwall. Now, we haven't heard from Sophie Rayworth outside BBC New Broadcasting House in London for some hours. Let's catch up with her and our guests now. Morning, Sophie.
Yeah, I heard that. 6:26.
Well, it's 11 minutes past 6 at the moment, and it sounds like Sophie's arranging a future appointment a little later in this hour. Hopefully she will be able to join us at some point as well. We have just one declaration to come in Scotland now. I think I'm right in saying we've had 58 of our 59 declarations, and it's just that recount in Kelso where they're counting the Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk seat. But let's go to Argyll and Bute, to Lochgilphead now, and speak to the new MP for Argyll and Bute, Brendan O'Hara, who defeated the Liberal Democrat Alan Reid. Congratulations to you, Brendan O'Hara. What difference will you and your SNP colleagues make in this House of Commons, given that it is extremely unlikely that you're going to be involved in government?
thank you for your congratulations, Glenn. I think it will make a huge difference. I think it's worth pointing out, though, that throughout this campaign we were told that if Scotland had voted Labour, then we could lock the Tories out of Downing Street. But the truth of the matter is that had every single person in Scotland voted Labour, we'd still have a Tory government. That's how ultimately powerless the Labour Party are in Scotland. And I think that what we will do is that we will always put Scotland first, and put Scotland's interests first. And it's still I haven't seen exactly, but if we are told that there could be an overall Conservative majority, then I think it's a disaster for Scotland. I think it's a disaster for people, progressive forces throughout the United Kingdom. And I think that our job is to try and build alliances across the Progressive Alliance within the United Kingdom, to lead the fight against austerity, to lead the fight against the renewal of Trident, and to get those promised powers delivered to the Scottish Parliament, as we were promised back in September.
The Prime Minister has said he will deliver what's in the Smith Commission. Does he need to do more than that?
I think the Smith Commission is an absolute baseline. I don't think that anybody seriously believes that the settled will of the Scottish people is the Smith Commission. If the settled will of the Smith Commission, the settled will of the Scottish people was the Smith Commission, then the SNP wouldn't have had the unprecedented success it enjoyed this evening. I think that there's an awful lot more. I mean, we're talking substantial, genuine, real powers have to be delivered to the Scottish Parliament. That's what the Scottish people were promised in September, and that's what the Scottish people demanded tonight.
So if David Cameron was to make you an offer along those lines, would you take it?
Sorry, offer along what lines?
Well, if he was to say, given the result in Scotland, we'll now move to a situation where we'll devolve maximum powers to the Scottish Parliament, would the SNP take that?
Well, I think the SNP is in the business of getting maximum powers to the Scottish Parliament. They were promised by Prime Minister Cameron back in September. They were promised by Mr Clegg and Miliband as well. So we are demanding what we were promised. So but the fact that it's David Cameron that delivers those substantial powers, that's fine. He's delivering them on behalf of the UK government, because it was the UK government who promised them back in September.
And what if he wanted something in return?
What would it... like what?
Well, he might want your support on certain votes in the House of Commons. We don't have the final figure for how many seats he's going to have.
Well, I think you can absolutely rest assured, Glenn, that the Scottish National Party will not do a deal to get a Conservative government into power. But they have promised us the powers to the Scottish Parliament, and that's what we are demanding. We're not demanding anything that we weren't promised. There's no new demand here.
Thanks for talking to us. Brendan O'Hara, live from Luckilpit. Let's hear more from Jackie Bird.
Well, Glenn, with fewer than 200 seats left to be declared, David Cameron has kept his Whitney constituency and, it appears, his job as Prime Minister. The UK election has recorded a disappointing night for Labour, and the vote in Scotland, with its extraordinary nationalist surge, has loomed large as Ed Miliband conceded.
And in Scotland, we've seen a surge of nationalism overwhelm our party. Now, I want to say to all the dedicated and decent colleagues in Scotland who have lost their seats that I'm deeply sorry for what has happened. And I also want to say that the next government has a huge responsibility. It has a huge responsibility in facing the very difficult task of keeping our country together. Whatever party we come from, if we believe in the United Kingdom, we should stand up for people in every part of our United Kingdom.
It's been a devastating night for the Lib Dems. They have lost 38 seats so far. And within the past hour, Danny Alexander, who served as Chief Secretary to the Treasury, lost his seat in what's the party's worst defeat since 1970. Veteran MP Jim Wallace has given his analysis, blaming the 5 years in coalition, says the damage was much higher than we expected. And Charles Kennedy, evocatively describing it as the night of the long ski and do's as he lost his Highland seat. Paddy Ashdown said, if you've stayed with us, last night it was, that he'd eat his hat if the exit poll was correct, showing that the Lib Dems would take only 10 seats. Well, they're currently sitting on just 6, so he could be having an interesting breakfast. It now appears that David Cameron could be on course to take 325 seats. It's not certain that he'll achieve an overall majority, but at worst, he's likely only to require the support of the Democratic Unionists, who so far have 8 MPs selected. So if you're just up and seeing the new day in the news, is that there's been an unprecedented landslide in Scotland, with the SNP taking 54 seats so far, with a record-breaking vote. The Tories, the Lib Dems and Labour, astonishingly, have only 1 apiece. We've got some front pages hot off the press and straight on to Twitter, as they do these days. There we are, the Scotsman, not the national picture, but it's obviously that Scottish influence, that incredible Scottish influence in this general election. Let's take a look at what the Herald is saying. There we are. Simple tells the story. SNP landslide. Glenn.
Thanks, Jackie. Let's go back to Bradford West and hear what George Galloway had to say when his defeat was confirmed by the returning officer.
I congratulate the new Member of Parliament, Naz Shah, on her remarkable victory, and it's obvious that the Labour Party will be celebrating here in Bradford this evening, and I congratulate, as I see him in the audience, Imran Hussain on his splendid victory in Bradford East also. It's the more remarkable because it's been a disastrous night for the Labour Party as a whole, I'm very sorry to say. The people of Bradford will wake up tomorrow, now really, to discover that the Conservative government are back, that the Labour leader will probably resign by lunchtime, that the Shadow Foreign Secretary has lost his seat, and when I last heard, the Shadow Chancellor, Ed Balls, may well have lost his. So that's very bad news for Bradford, and not what any of us who call themselves part of the Labour movement would want to see. So I don't begrudge the Labour members here their moment of celebration, of course. But there will be others who are already celebrating. The venal and the vile, the racists and the Zionists will all be celebrating. The hyena can dance on the lion's grave, but it can never be a lion. And in any case, I'm not in my grave. As a matter of fact, I'm going off now to plan my next campaign. It's been a privilege to have spent the 3 years that I did as the Member of Parliament for Bradford West. It is truly a special place full of special people, and I shall miss them. And Bradford will always have a central place in my heart. Wassalamu alaikum. Thank you very much indeed.
George Galloway accepting that he has lost his seat in Bradford West, but reassuring us all, if that's the right word, that we haven't seen the last of him. He said he was off to plan his next campaign. Where and whether it's parliamentary or not, we don't know, but no doubt he'll let us know sooner rather than later. Let's bring in a new panel member. In fact, we've got 2 new panel members. We've got Stuart Maxwell for the SNP, and on this side, Paul Sinclair, who is from a Labour background, a former advisor to the Scottish Labour leader Joanne Lamont, and a former advisor in Downing Street to Prime Minister Gordon Brown, but also somebody who started out in that line of work as an advisor to Douglas Alexander, who's lost his seat tonight. Your thoughts on that?
On a personal level, deeply sad, and I think it's bad for Scottish politics as well, because he is a big figure. You're right, he was my boss. I found him a man of great integrity, of great intelligence, a great man, I'm afraid, and we've lost him.
He and Jim Murphy both made very dignified speeches when they lost their seats, but where does that leave the Scottish Labour Party with only 1 MP in Scotland? Can Jim Murphy rebuild?
I think he has to. The one thing I think we should do is take a leaf out of the SNP's book, because it's quite a successful book. And when they lost the referendum, which must have been devastating, there was no recrimination, there were no public bloodlettings. There was in fact a seamless transition from one leader to the other. Now, I'm not suggesting we need a transition from one leader to the other, because what we've had in the Labour Party is, when we lost in 2007, the answer was get rid of Jack. When we lost in 2011, the answer was get rid of Ian. Even when we won last year, the answer was apparently get rid of Joanne Lamont. The Labour Party has more profound problems than this, and rather than just look for another head, another beheading of someone, I think it's time that the party came together and looked at what fundamentally is wrong.
And what do you think fundamentally is wrong with Scottish Labour?
I think the SNP have very successfully done two things over a period of years. One, they have managed to convince the Scottish public that the Scottish Labour Party ain't Scottish, and now the final part of it, it ain't Labour anymore. I think we have to establish our Scottish credentials. I think the party should be autonomous. It can be a sister party to the UK Labour Party, so that decisions are made up here, and we realise that the focus of the Scottish Labour Party is Holyrood, and that the people that we send to Westminster, I'm not saying it's secondary, but one of the things that we've lost, if you think of the legendary Scottish Secretary, Willie Ross, and Willie Ross used to say when a Scottish MP got made a minister in whatever department, he would sit them down and say, "What's your job, son?" And however they described it, he would go, "No, no, 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 no. Your job is to be a Scottish ambassador. Your job is to be ambassador for Scotland at Westminster." And we felt that with people like John Smith and Robin Cook and Donald Dewar and George Robertson, and the list could go on. And somewhere we've lost that. We need to get that back.
If you were an independent Labour Party, very briefly, would Scottish MPs from that party elected to Westminster, would they have the potential to serve in a UK Labour government?
They would have the potential to serve, yes.
But it would be an independent Scottish Labour Party?
Yes.
Paul Sinclair, thanks very much indeed for the moment. Let's go to the BBC's Deputy Political Editor, James Landale, who's in Downing Street. Has David Cameron arrived back there yet, James?
Good morning. No, he hasn't yet. We know that he's on his way back to London and he will come here at some stage. The expectation is that if the results continue as they do, that if he remains Prime Minister, he will probably go to see Her Majesty the Queen at some stage this morning and then come here to Downing Street. And the expectation is that that's when we'll probably get the first public statement that we'll have of the morning, since he said his few words after his declaration in Oxfordshire just about an hour or so ago.
James, thanks very much indeed for updating us live from Downing Street. It's going to be a very long day ahead as that government, whatever form it takes shape. Let me talk a little bit more with our panel and catch a word with Stuart Maxwell for the SNP. Paul Sinclair was suggesting that the Labour Party would need to become more autonomous, an independent Scottish Labour Party. The SNP obviously already is in that position, but you're now going to have two rival power bases, aren't you? Because you've got a big group of SNP MSPs at Holyrood, where you're the Scottish Government, but you're going to have this rival power block in London.
No, we're going to have a second and, as you say, a large group of MPs in the House of Commons, but I don't see it as a rival group. I think Paul was fair about his analysis of the way that the party took the result in September and moved on very swiftly, accepted it and worked together. There were no recriminations. And I think, by the same token, effectively, this new challenge, which I accept as a challenge, will be faced in the same kind of magnanimous way. I think we will move forward as a single party. I think that is the one thing that we have managed to overcome, perhaps in previous years, many decades ago perhaps, where there were these kind of problems inside the party. They just no longer exist. We are a unified force, and I think having a large group of MPs is a huge success, obviously, but also not a threat to the group of MSPs or the party as a whole.
So no rivalry, but certainly a very, very large figure in Alex Salmond getting back onto the centre stage in politics at Westminster. Do you think Nicola Sturgeon might have to watch out for what he's got to say and how he conducts himself in the House of Commons? Will she be finding herself having a backseat driver from the House of Commons?
I don't think she will. I think Alex knows fine well who the leader of the party is, as we all do, and Nicola's a strong and I think a confident leader of the Scottish National Party. I don't think she will have any problems in stamping her authority on the party. I think we've seen that from the moment she's taken over, and I think, frankly, I think Alex Salmond will be a huge asset to the party at Westminster with the experience he brings, but I don't think he's got any intention of rocking the boat or being a backseat driver.
Margaret Mitchell, from the Conservative perspective, we heard earlier from Liz Smith, who unfortunately had to cut her off as she was developing her thinking that the way in which politics in Scotland has realigned, she felt would require potentially a new unionist party to counter the SNP. What I didn't get the chance to ask her is whether that unionist party would be the current Conservative and Unionist Party, a Conservative and Unionist Party reformed, an independent Scottish Tory party, or a whole new party altogether?
Well, I think it's Ruth Davison's party. It's the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party. And I think during the campaign that was crystal clear in everything that Ruth said in the hustings, very clear that she wouldn't be doing deals with the SNP. They were a unionist party, and that was absolutely foremost in all of our policies. And people could be assured that if they voted for us, we would be protecting what has been a fantastic success story, the United Kingdom. But I disagree with Stuart. I think there's going to be huge problems now. Alex Salmond isn't someone who likes to play second fiddle. He will have a platform in the UK, and I think there will be divisions within the SNP from what's become known as the 45 group, who will see the result today as a mandate for another referendum. And Nicola Sturgeon's line, which she confirmed in Off-Unister today, that this was not about independence, it was a UK election and representing Scotland.
Very briefly, Caroline Leckie, should there be another referendum, and if so, how soon?
I think, again, when the people make it clear that that is their express will. Can I just make a comment about the Labour Party in reference to the SNP? The clear difference is purpose and lack of, absence of an understanding of purpose. The Labour Party used to be under Keir Hardie, the Labour Party of Home Rule, which was everything apart from defence and foreign affairs. They haven't even gone back to that. And so for the Labour Party to reclaim any ground, it has to be very clearly Home Rule for itself, as well as Scotland. And if it's got any chance of recovery whatsoever, it needs to develop that purpose and ditch all the unbelievable and incredible veers towards policies that Jim Murphy has displayed as some sort of snake oil salesman. There needs to be some integrity and principle returned if it's to have any hope. But I don't think it will, because I think the SNP has replaced the Labour Party as the mass party of the working class in Scotland, and that's a challenge for everybody in terms of people who are not in the SNP about how you respond to that.
I'll hopefully bring you in again in a little while, Paul. But right now it's gone 6:30 on Friday the 8th of May, after an extraordinary night of general election results. Here's Andrew Kerr with the story of the night so far.
I declare that Mary Black is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the
An extraordinary night in Scottish politics, a record-breaking night. Labour's Shadow Foreign Secretary Douglas Alexander ousted by 20-year-old Mary Black, now the youngest MP.
I would like to thank all the other candidates for their participation, and in particular, whilst I appreciate that this is a blow for Douglas Alexander, I truly hope he will remain to see his future in politics once he is recovered from this result.
Nearby, a short time later, the Scottish Labour leadership was decapitated. Jim Murphy, in the post for 5 months, toppled by surging SNP.
I give public notice that Kirsten Francis Oswald is duly elected as a Member of Parliament for the East Renfrewshire constituency.
It's proven hard to turn round years of difficulty with the Scottish Labour Party in just 5 short months. Tonight, Scotland has lost so many great members of Parliament from all across the country, and I'd like to pay tribute to each and every one of them. There will be more to say about this and what it means for Scotland in the days to come. But for me personally, and for the Scottish Labour Party, the fight goes on and our cause continues.
Like Skittles, Labour seats fell one after another with incredible swings to the SNP, 39% in Glasgow North East. One former Labour MP says Jim Murphy should go.
Clearly, if he ceases to be an MP, then obviously he can no longer remain as leader just on technical grounds, but morally, as the man who's led us to the biggest ever disaster that Labour has suffered in Scotland, or indeed, I think probably anywhere, if not anywhere in the world, then of course he can't continue.
The SNP leader, Nicola Sturgeon, hailed her magnificent 7 in Glasgow, a clean nationalist sweep in the city.
I think a good night for Scotland as well. The tectonic plates of Scottish politics have clearly shifted. What we're seeing, I think, is a historic shift in Scottish political opinion. It hasn't happened overnight, not even in the last 7 months since the referendum, although I think that's accelerated the process. But Labour's been losing the trust of people in Scotland now over a period of years.
Hard graft has paid off. Ms Sturgeon's proud parents were keeping an eye on their daughter in Ayrshire.
The last time we saw Nicola was Easter Sunday, and so after this tonight I don't know when we'll actually speak to her face to face again.
So I can therefore declare that Alex Salmond is duly elected to serve in the UK Parliament as the member for the Gordon constituency.
Nicola Sturgeon's old boss, Alex Salmond, safely won in Gordon and had this message.
There is a swing underway in Scotland, the like of which has not been seen in recorded politics. It is twice the level of any swing recorded in Scotland or indeed across the United Kingdom since electoral records began in 1835. It is an extraordinary statement of intent from the people of Scotland. The Scottish lion has roared this morning across the country.
Ian Blackford is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the Ross, Skye and Lochaber constituency.
After 32 years as an MP, the former Liberal Democrat leader Charles Kennedy lost Ross, Skye and Lochaber.
I'm very fond of political history, and tonight, if nothing else, we can all consider and reflect in years to come, perhaps tell our grandchildren, we were there the night of the long skiing doos.
The Lib Dems' Jo Swinson had hoped to hold Eastern Bartonshire. She too was drowned by the rising SNP. Alistair Carmichael did hold his seat in Orkney and Shetland. But another major scalp was claimed as Danny Alexander lost his in Inverness just before 6 a.m. A terrible night for the party, but the Conservatives clung on to David Mundell's seats.
I would very much like some colleagues. Nobody wants that more than me. I didn't 10 years ago envisage being the only Conservative MP in Scotland, but it's something that I do with great pride.
A lonely Ian Murray was elected as the Labour MP for Edinburgh South, a crisis for Scottish Labour, for Ed Miliband and perhaps the Union.
And I also want to say that the next government has a huge responsibility. It has a huge responsibility in facing the very difficult task of keeping our country together. Whatever party we come from, if we believe in the United Kingdom, we should stand up for people in every part of our United Kingdom.
But this night belongs to the Scottish nationalists, an extraordinary night of triumph.
507.
Andrew Kerr reporting. Well, let's just confirm some other Scottish results for you, and we'll start with Dunfermline and Fife West. So an SNP gain from Labour in Dunfermline. The SNP with 50% of the vote, Labour with 32%, the Conservatives up 12, the Lib Dems up, the Lib Dems with a 4% share. I wonder if we can just actually take that back to confirm the result and who's won. Can we do that? There we are. There's the result in Dunfermline and Fife West. Douglas Chapman for the SNP taking that seat with 28,096. Douglas Chapman, a councillor at the moment and a spokesman on education for the Convention of Scottish Local Authorities. He's beat the Labour MP Thomas Docherty, who finished with 17,744 votes. The Conservatives in third. The Lib Dems fourth, the Greens in fifth place. A majority of 10,352 for the SNP in Dunfermline and Fife West. They've taken 40% of the vote there. Labour, their vote is up 40% there. Labour down 15. The Conservatives up 5. Lib Dems down 31. And a swing of 27% from Labour to the SNP in Dunfermline and Fife West. Here's the Ayrshire North and Arran result, where the SNP's Patricia Gibson's been elected with 28,641 votes, defeating Labour's Katie Clark, who was the MP, with just over 15,000 votes for her. The SNP with 53% of the vote, Labour with 28%. A turnout there of 71%. The SNP vote up 27, Labour down 19. And the swing, a 23% swing from Labour to the SNP in Ayrshire North and Arran. Here's the East Lothian result. The SNP have gained East Lothian from Labour. George Caravan, the journalist and economic commentator, has won East Lothian with 25,104 votes, beating Labour's Fiona Donnell, who had 18,301. The Conservatives third, the Lib Dems fourth, the Greens in fifth place there. A majority of the SNP of 6,803. The SNP have 43% of the vote in East Lothian compared to 31% for Labour. And that was an area that voted heavily no in the independence referendum. The SNP vote nonetheless up 27 points, Labour down 14. And there's the swing from Labour to the SNP in East Lothian of 20%. And incidentally, the new MP there, George Caravan, saying he'll take only £27,000 of his MP salary, putting the rest towards his constituency office. The Midlothian result, the SNP have gained Midlothian from Labour. Owen Thompson elected there with 24,453 votes. Labour's Kenny Young in second place with 14,594. Conservatives third, Greens in fourth place. Lib Dems down in sixth there. A majority of almost 10,000 for the SNP in Midlothian with 51% vote share. Labour with 30%. A turnout of 71% in Midlothian. SNP vote up 30. Labour down 17, Lib Dems down 15. And there's the swing from Labour to the SNP in Midlothian of 23%. The Murray result, that's the seat of the SNP's Westminster leader, Angus Robertson. 24,384 votes for him, the SNP holding Murray. The Conservatives in second place, Douglas Ross with 15,319. Labour third, UKIP fourth, Lib Dems fifth and Greens in sixth place. A majority of 9,065 for Angus Robertson in Murray with a 49% vote share. The vote for the SNP up 10 points on last time. The Conservatives up 5. Labour down 7. Lib Dems down 12. There's the swing. It's a little swing. Probably one of the smallest swings we've dealt with tonight. It might actually be the smallest swing we've dealt with tonight. Just 2%. Perth and North Perthshire, Pete Wishart of the SNP has held that seat with 27,379 votes, beating the Conservatives' Alexander Stewart on 17,738. Labour third, Lib Dems fourth, the Greens in fifth place and UKIP in sixth. 51% share of the vote to the SNP, the Conservatives on 33%. Majority there for the SNP of 9,641. Their vote up 11 points in last time. Conservatives up 2, Labour down 8, Lib Dems down even more, 9 points. And there's a swing from the Conservatives to the SNP of 4% in Perth and North Perthshire. Now let's catch up with our political editor Brian Taylor and more of the story of the night. Brian.
Glenn, thanks very much indeed. We've been tracking all of the results, of course. Let's just remind ourselves of where we are in terms of the Scottish picture. You can see there on the hex map. Let's take a look first at the basic statistics, because they still are startling. Scotland's 59 seats, 55 have gone to the SNP. There has not been a result like this in history. One Conservative, that's David Mundell, one Labour, that's Ian Murray, and one Liberal Democrat, that's Alistair Carmichael, and one seat still to come, Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk. So let's move across to from that over to the hex map. Remember that earlier in the evening, it was all red and there was Liberal Democrat seats all over the place, and now it's almost uniformly a yellow picture. Down at the bottom there, Dumfriesshire, Clydesdale and Tweeddale still held by David Mundell. Berwickshire yet to be decided, it's still a grey. Edinburgh South, that's Ian Murray's constituency. Let's tip the camera up a bit and move back up to the north, and way, all those SNP seats, and finally Orkney and Shetland for Alistair Carmichael. Now, how does this come about? Well, it came about, as Tom Harris memorably said, because the rival parties to the SNP didn't win enough votes. But let's look at the swing. Let's look at the swing on the night. Scottish average swing. This is the average, a 24% swing from Labour to the SNP. Some much higher than that, some absolute slackers on the SNP benches not managing to make that figure. Seriously, that is an incredible swing, absolutely astonishing. The people of Scotland delivering a really vigorous verdict, derived perhaps from a sense of wishing their voice reflected, derived perhaps from post-referendum feelings, derived perhaps from a feeling that Labour was not serving them sufficiently in terms of their aims and objectives. Just one final little thought, Glenn. 60 years ago, 1955, a party gained 50.1% of the popular vote. We generally say it was the Tories. It was actually the Scottish Unionist Party was what they stood as at the time. They didn't even call themselves Conservative, so confident were they in that Unionist message. Tonight, the SNP are at 50.2%, or heading that way, in the votes in Scotland, a party which espouses independence. And they say that politics never changes. It's changed tonight in Scotland, all right.
Brian, thanks very much indeed. Let's pick up with Professor Charlie Jeffrey on some of the points emerging from the UK-wide result. And I suppose the exit poll, although it shocked and surprised many of us at the outset, has proven to be more accurate than not, but the same can't really be said of the opinion polls in the election campaign, which put the Conservatives and Labour neck and neck right up to the very end.
Right up to the very end. The Guardian yesterday lunchtime put out the last one, which was 33-33. What we're looking at now is 37% Conservatives, 31 Labour, and with that a very, very different outcome. It looks like just an overall majority for the Conservatives. All of the polls, all of the forecasts beforehand were for a hung parliament. We may not have a hung parliament.
And what would you put that down to? Because there was a lot of opinion polling and it was fairly consistent.
This was the most polled election ever. It was heavily polled through different methods, telephone and on internet survey platforms. There should have been, if there was something wrong with it, we should have seen it because of the sheer scale of the polling done. One thing that seems to have been the case is that we've got this shy Tory phenomenon, which we saw back in 1992 when John Major unexpectedly won. It seems like everybody has systematically underestimated the strength of the Conservative Party. Everybody got the Scottish National Party pretty much right. Very, very few were in the end predicting that the SNP would win fewer than 50 seats. But in the rest of the UK, they got it wrong.
And what about UKIP? Did the pollsters and the pundits get them wrong too?
The level of support predicted for UKIP is roundabout right, and I think this will be one of the big stories when we reflect on the evening. UKIP's got one seat now. It may well get one more. It just missed out in Thurrock and in Boston and Skegness. But I think they're going to end up with something over 100 second places. And that's a quite remarkable change in voting behaviour. Nigel Farage said this the other day. He said, may not win many seats, but we'll get 100 second places. That will be our platform for the future.
Thanks very much, Charlie. These are pictures, live pictures of the Prime Minister's cavalcade, motorcade, making its way through the streets of London as he heads back to Downing Street and to continue office as Prime Minister. We'll talk more with our panel in just a moment. I just want to show you some of the front pages of today's newspapers, and I'll do that to this camera here. Here's the Scottish Daily Mail. Many of the front pages based on the exit poll. The Scottish Daily Mail has Cameron heading back to number 10, which he is quite literally doing at this moment in time. The Daily Record's front page has exit poll sensation. First Lady next to a picture of Nicola Sturgeon saying Nicola leads SNP to historic victory. Scottish Labour are humiliated by virtual wipeout. They do have one MP with one seat still to declare. The Daily Mirror has a black front page. 5 more damned years is their headline with a question mark. And if that's a reference to David Cameron continuing in office, it looks like he certainly will. The Daily Express, Scottish edition, rampant SNP prepare for Westminster war is their headline, suggesting that the SNP will cause trouble in the House of Commons. The Herald, landslide for SNP as poll puts Tories back in number 10, and a picture of Nicola Sturgeon casting her vote earlier in the day yesterday. The Scotsman front page goes with the UK-wide story, Tories on course to form the next government. The Times Scottish edition, Tories out in front, but the picture again of Nicola Sturgeon and her husband at the polling station. The Daily Telegraph, Cameron will hold on to power, say exit polls, and in fact since the exit poll his position appears to be strengthening. We're now predicting 325 seats for the Conservatives, which would be a working majority. Shock exit poll points to Conservative victory as the Independent's take on the exit poll. Poll shocker for Labour is the Guardian's front page. And lastly, the Sun, the Scottish Sun, which supported the SNP whilst the English edition supported the Conservatives. Take Nat is their headline. SNP smash Labour, Cam back at number 10, says the Sun. Well, let's pick up with the panellists that are with us at this early hour of the morning. And Paul Sinclair, we talked a little bit about what Labour needs to do now in Scotland to recover, and Caroline Leckie was suggesting there might not be a way back. But just in terms of how the party works, what actually happens now? Does Jim Murphy just carry on and decide what to do next, or does the party's ruling body have a role? What happens as you understand it?
It's rather unclear, but as I understand it, because Jim's lost his seat, it'll now be down to a vote of the Scottish Executive Committee of the Labour Party to decide whether he can continue or not.
And that would happen in fairly short order, do you think?
I would have thought that would happen within the next 7 days, yeah.
And what do you think the mood is likely to be in a party that is so battered and bruised, having suffered so many defeats in Scotland tonight?
Well, what I hope it's not is prepared to turn in itself, because, again, going back to what happened to the SNP after the referendum, there was clearly a civilised discussion about changing leader. That didn't happen in the Labour Party. Joanne Lamont was just left with an entirely untenable position. That's not mature politics. It's not good for the party in any way, and the public sense it. And the public, it made the Labour Party look like a shambles. And one of the things about the Labour Party, one of the biggest criticisms of it, is a sense of entitlement. They're just entitled to win elections. And I think when parties appear to be fighting just for the leadership or for people's own position, then that sense of entitlement comes across again. Those days have to end.
So would you also like to see Ed Miliband given the chance to build towards future elections and up to and including another UK general election?
Well, let's see what the result is and what Ed thinks. I'm trying to be the peace candidate here, saying no recrimination. I mean, I think there is a very strong case for Jim staying on, and I would put that case thus: it's pretty likely we're not going to win the Scottish elections in 2016. The big achievement would be to stop there being a nationalist majority. At the same time, there are talented young people in Holyrood, like Kes Dugdale, Jenny Mara, Neil Bibby, Drew Smith. These people must be allowed time to develop. And I go back to, if you look at what happened when Nicola Sturgeon failed to win the SNP leadership in 2004 and Alex Salmond had to come back. If that had been in the Labour Party, her career would have been over. But instead, she was given the time and space to develop. to become her own woman, and that's a very, very strong woman, not just in Scotland but on the UK stage. So therefore, I think what would be wrong, we need to give the talent that we have the time and space to similarly develop.
OK, we'll pick up with other panellists in a minute or two, I hope. But let's hear more from Jackie Bird.
Thank you, Glenn. Well, good morning to you. If you are just waking up, Scotland is waking up this morning to a virtual Labour wipeout and an almost certain defeat nationally in the contest for number 10 Downing Street. Labour has only one MP left here. Ian Murray held on to Edinburgh South with just one declaration to come in Berwickshire. Big guns like Douglas Alexander, their campaign coordinator, gone. Margaret Curran, Shadow Scottish Secretary, gone. And perhaps the biggest embarrassment, Jim Murphy, now without a seat and facing an uncertain future as Scottish leader. The night belonged to the SNP, celebrating in Glasgow, where they have taken all of the city's 7 seats. In total, they have 55 seats, one still to declare, and the return to Westminster of their former leader, Alex Salmond, who had this to say.
It is an extraordinary statement of intent from the people of Scotland. The Scottish lion has roared this morning across the country.
The Tories have hung on to their one seat in Dumfriesshire. The Lib Dems are also left with only one seat in Scotland, losing big names like Charles Kennedy and the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Danny Alexander. The national picture is becoming much clearer. People are waking up to the results and reacting to the news on social media. On Twitter, David Cameron, echoing his winning speech in his constituency, has not surprisingly focused on the union. There are his quotes, if he is back in number 10. The BBC's political correspondent John Pienaar says Ed Miliband will go. He's emphatic. Not in a million years, he says, will be contemplating he can have a second go at this. UKIP fared well south of the border in terms of actual votes, if not seats, but in Scotland, their leader, David Coburn, lost his deposit in Falkirk. One final thing for you. Respect candidate George Galloway, after losing his Bradford seat to Labour, said this. I'm not going to read it out. I'll let you mull it over. Glenn.
Jackie, thanks very much indeed. And at the start of the night, you may remember that Paddy Ashdown said he would eat his hat if our exit poll was anything like accurate. He has now told the BBC that he is eating his hat. He did say it was going to be made of marzipan, so it's not as unpalatable as it might sound. We were promising you a result from the last constituency to declare in Scotland, Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk, by 7 o'clock. Well, I didn't promise you. It was actually Cameron Buttle who promised it. So you've got 5 minutes, Cameron.
I think you'll find, Glenn, I said around 7 o'clock, and around 7 o'clock could mean 7:30, which is the latest update. We're looking at around 7:30. I've been speaking to senior council staff. As you can see, the recount is well underway. They're all looking pretty chipper over there, and apparently they were quite happy to get stuck into the recount. It was announced about 5 o'clock that we needed a recount. They got stuck straight back in shortly after 5:30. There was concern that they were going to have to bring in a brand new team and start the recount again at 9 o'clock, but it looks like we're going to avoid that, and we're still waiting to hear whether it's going to be John Lamont for the Conservatives or Callum Kerr for the SNP. Mike Moore has already pretty much conceded defeat. He's accepted a long time ago that he didn't think he was going to be a front runner in this seat. So Conservative or SNP, you could cut the tension in here with a knife.
Cameron, thanks very much indeed for that update. And wouldn't it be extraordinary if on this night that the SNP has surged and taken so many seats from Labour that the Conservatives actually picked up a seat, doubled their numbers in Scotland and had twice as many MPs in Scotland as the Labour Party? From what Cameron Buttle is saying, that is a possibility, unless, of course, the SNP are successful in taking that Berwickshire seat. It's just a few minutes away from 7 o'clock now. It is the general election 2015, and overnight it has become clear that David Cameron will remain as Prime Minister and may have a working majority in Parliament without the need for the Liberal Democrats or any other party to lend him support to get his business done, assuming all his MPs back him on all the measures he seeks to bring before Parliament over the next 5 years. Labour has failed to make the breakthroughs it would have needed to see Ed Miliband becoming our next Prime Minister. It's also been a disastrous night for the Liberal Democrats throughout the UK, losing many high-profile figures. But the big winners, certainly in Scotland, have been the SNP, who've taken many seats in Scotland from Labour and indeed from the Liberal Democrats. Let's talk more now with Rachel Massey, who's at the count in Aberdeen.
Good morning, welcome to a very frosty northeast here this morning. I had to defrost the car as I was coming in. Now I've come in here to Thames Bakery on George Street here in Aberdeen to get a bit of a warm up, and also because I hear that they give the best butteries in Scotland. Now if you don't know what a buttery is, it's a bit of a northeast delicacy. Very high on the calorie count, but it's equally delicious. Now someone that's come in for his breakfast this morning, and I've harpooned him into speaking to me about the election, is Steve Argo. Steve, how are you this morning?
Fine, thanks. Very well.
Can I ask you how you voted yesterday?
Yes, I voted for the SNP because I believe we're time for change, and I'm glad that we've got the result here in Aberdeen.
So you must have been delighted then, are you?
Yes, aye, totally ecstatic. Just a pity for the result overall in the country, because I just wanted some change, and I didn't think the Conservatives are the party to go for.
And what do you think is going to happen now? Because obviously there's lots of deals to be made. What would you like to see over the next few days and weeks?
Well, I would have hoped that the SNP could have done a deal with the Labour Party and would have knocked the Conservatives back, but possibly it doesn't look like that at all, but we'll just have to wait and see.
And if you got your kind of dream coalition or dream deal, what would that be? What would you like to see?
Well, the SNP would definitely be the Labour Party, and more powers for Scotland, just to drive through, because it's a time we needed some change here in Scotland and get some more powers.
And what did you think about the election period? Were you quite involved in it? Did you watch all the programmes?
I watched some of them. I thought the one with all the party leaders was quite good, and at least Scotland did get some airtime this year, which has been better than previous years.
And what would you like to see? So you voted SNP. What would you like to see happen in the next year?
Just more powers for Scotland, just to see, well, the English government, well, English people just recognising Scotland a bit more, and get some more money for Scotland and do something with the oil money that we've got. That's all, really.
Excellent, thank you very much. I'll leave you to go get your breakfast. Thank you very much for speaking to me today. Well, that's it from me. I'm going to be here hanging about for the next wee while, trying to avoid eating too many butteries, and also getting some of the views here from Aberdeen after the election.
Oh, they'll have those butteries counted in the bakery in Aberdeen, even if they haven't counted any votes there overnight. That's the scene in London, and David Cameron making the final part of his journey through the capital on his way back to Downing Street to resume his duties as Prime Minister. Not that he's ever actually given them up, and even if it had been a hung Parliament, he would have remained Prime Minister at least long enough to see whether or not he would be able to form a government. We're now saying that it's likely he will be able to command a majority, a working majority in the House of Commons, and there is his Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, still awaiting his own declaration in Tatton in Cheshire, which was a big name in the general election back in 1997 when Neil Hamilton, the then Conservative MP, was voted out. Labour and the Liberal Democrats at that time withdrew their candidates to make it possible for the independent journalist Martin Bell to become the MP. But he promised to serve only one term, and when he stood down at the next election, the seat returned to being a Conservative seat with George Osborne as the MP. He's held it ever since. I don't think there's much doubt that he's going to hold it again tonight. But it'll be interesting to hear what he has to say when that declaration comes in. Brian Taylor, we've talked a lot tonight about these results as they have come in. What do you think the consequences of them will be, particularly in terms of the future of the United Kingdom?
Right. The Conservative government, as it will now be, has to decide how to respond to the set of circumstances with which they are confronted. We have the idea from Boris Johnson of federalism, which is all very well, except nobody has any idea what to federate. Whether to federate Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland, whether to federate the English regions who don't want it, or whether to simply give the powers to Scotland and allow the rest to work in a kind of asymmetrical.
OK, let's get the declaration
setup.
from Tatton, Brian.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Suarez. I am the acting returning officer. Now I shall move to the formal proceedings. Declaration of result of poll. I, the undersigned, being the acting returning officer at the election of Member of Parliament for the Tatton constituency held on the 7th of May 2015, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the election is as follows. Hutton, Stuart Alex, UK Independence Party, UKIP, 4,871. Osborne, George, the Conservative Party candidate, 26,552. Pinto Dushinsky, David Jonathan, Labour Party, 8,311. Rothery, Tina Louise, Green Party, 1,714. Wilson, Gareth George, Liberal Democrats, 3,850. The number of ballot papers rejected was as follows. Want of an official mark, 0. Voting for more candidates than the voter was entitled to, 34. Writing or mark by which voter could be identified, 4. Being unmarked or wholly void for uncertainty, 147. Rejected in part, 0. Total rejected, 185. And I do hereby declare that the said George Osborne is duly elected a Member of Parliament for the Tatton constituency. 8th of May 2015, turnout 69.
George Osborne is back in Tatton, the Conservatives holding the Tatton constituency in Cheshire. Cheshire even. George Osborne with 26,552 votes.
Thank you very much. Let me begin by thanking
let's hear what he has to say.
The returning officer and all the team that have conducted this count and the police for keeping us secure, not just tonight, but every day of the year. Can I also say thank you to my fellow candidates on a really well-fought contest and all conducted in a really great democratic spirit. I want to thank my agent, Hayley, over there.
OK, well, while he does his thank yous, let's just confirm the details of that result. George Osborne well ahead of Labour in Tatton, a majority of 18,241 and a turnout of 70%. And I wonder if he will remain as Chancellor of the Exchequer in David Cameron's second government. 59% of the vote going Conservative in Tatton, 18% for Labour. Change on last time? Tories up 4, Labour up 1, UKIP up 11, Lib Dems, the big losers there, down 14 percentage points. And a swing in Tatton from Labour to the Conservatives of 1%. Let's listen in again.
And that is what we will now set about doing, to make sure we have a country that lives within her means, to make sure we have an economy that works for everyone in our United Kingdom, to bring that United Kingdom together, which is clearly one of the big tasks we now face, to make sure we have the right relationship with Europe, and also a particular passion of mine, to build a northern powerhouse here in the north of England. We've had a historic result tonight. We've got historic challenges ahead of us. So now we will get back to work and make sure we complete the task. Thank you very much.
An historic result with historic challenges ahead, says George Osborne in Tatton. And a promise from him to build what he calls his northern powerhouse, devolving power from Westminster to the north of England, as well as the promises that David Cameron has made to press ahead as quickly as possible with further devolution to Scotland and to Wales, the further devolution promised following the Smith Commission. Let's bring in our business and economy editor, Douglas Fraser, who hasn't been up all night and is looking very, very fresh-faced.
Fresh pair of legs, yeah.
When did you get up?
It was about 3 o'clock.
About 3 o'clock. So you have been following it for some hours, and it is an extraordinary story. What's your take? What's your assessment?
Well, clearly two very different elections taking place, one of which is confirming all the polls that we didn't quite believe because we had no reference points for what has happened in Scotland. It's utterly unprecedented, and you've been talking a lot about that. I think also the surprise, in a sense, is rather greater from south of the border, that the Tories are doing better than anybody expected. It was assumed there'd be a hung parliament. The whole SNP successful strategy was based on the notion of a hung parliament, with Labour being very much a player. And clearly everything changes now, even having broken through to the possibility of a very, very slim majority. David Cameron has to address the issue of Scotland yet again with no easy solutions. As Brian was saying, you know, federalism is not an easy thing to introduce, even if that does attract the Tories, and many will be opposed to it. I think the other thing looking ahead for him coming in, which has a Scottish dimension as well, is that he now has to go for a referendum on European Union membership. There's no way around that. And that will take up an awful lot of time and political energy for the next 2 years. It was assumed in a hung parliament that might be something that could be parked, but now that's going to dominate a large chunk of the next parliament.
And first of all, he's got to try and renegotiate the UK's terms of membership with the European Union so that he's in a position, he hopes, to advocate a vote to stay in the EU.
Yes, if you look at the next few weeks, the 18th of this month, he's back in the House of Commons again. There's a state opening of Parliament, and about 10 days after that, he's got his first summit with other EU leaders, and he's going to have to start producing something out the bag, because although he said there was a story to tell about how he'd managed to get some things out of the European Union, he's also made a bit of a mess of things, such as the appointment of the President, Juncker.
Opposing the man who
he lost a lot of
is
face
now the President.
on that. So he's now got to go back to them and say, I've got a mandate. It's not a very strong mandate, but what are you going to give me in order to keep Britain within the EU? They do not have the problems to seek in the EU, and there's a story running there about what happens to Greece, which most world markets are much more interested in at the moment.
Margaret Mitchell, what do you hope David Cameron can get out of the European Union, if that's the right way of putting it? What changes do you hope he can achieve?
Well, to renegotiate our terms. There's so much waste within the European Union.
Any particular powers you want back?
I think there are powers to be looked at that should be negotiated. I think it strengthens the Prime Minister's hand now that it looks like a Conservative government, a Conservative majority government, and I think that will reflect and give him added power in Europe when he is negotiating, because I don't think Europe wants Britain to leave, and therefore I think that strengthens his hand. So I think there's a lot of reflection to be done tonight. There's been, we say it quite often, historic things happened. There really have been, and I think we need to assess what's happened in Scotland. For me, one of the big things that's happened is we don't have Alex Salmond leading the party anymore. We have Nicola Sturgeon, and I think she played very, very strongly to the female vote, which Alex Salmond was never really able to capture. That played into it. I think she's played it very, very well in terms of Labour. I want to do business with Labour, but in Westminster, and we're the best person here to deliver that. I also think PR and local government...
Proportional representation.
Yes, proportional. Was the start of the Labour demise in Scotland, because that gave the SNP a foothold in constituencies where they were absolutely nowhere, and they've built on that over the years.
Paul Sinclair, perhaps just pick up on the point that Margaret Mitchell has made about the impact that Nicola Sturgeon has had on women voters. Is that something that you recognise, that she has been a more attractive leadership figure to many female voters?
I think so. I mean, Alex Salmond is a Marmite figure, and I think Nicola Sturgeon is much more attractive. And, you know, we found anecdotally quite, you know, there were people who we were canvassing who'd been solidly Labour voters, who'd voted no in the referendum, and would vote no in a second referendum, but were saying, I'm voting SNP because Nicola Sturgeon makes me feel proud. And I think that's one of the things, you know, when the Labour Party was winning and winning big in Scotland, we had people like John Smith and Robin Cook and Donald Dewar, who everybody saw as, you know, quintessentially Scottish. They were rooted in Scotland. And we've lost that along the way and looked like a metropolitan party. And therefore, I think Nicola made people feel proud. And I think that's why she got such a vote.
We're hearing that there may be a recount in the constituency held by Ed Balls in the Morley and Outwood constituency. He did just have a majority of 1,101 votes there the last time, and we were reporting much earlier that he had acknowledged in conversations with journalists that he did have a fight on his hands in that seat in West Yorkshire this time around, but a possible recount there, which suggests it is very close indeed. And David Cameron, very close indeed, to Downing Street as he makes his return journey from the count for the Witney constituency in Oxfordshire, where he won very comfortably. His win in this general election, a little less comfortable. We're still predicting 325 seats, but a bigger win for the Conservatives than last time around, to the extent that they may not need partners in power. We're going to get that declaration in Kelso in the next few moments. The candidates there have been called to the stage for the declaration in the Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk constituency, and if you've just joined us, the word from that count is that it's either going to be a win for the Conservatives or a win for the SNP, but the Liberal Democrat candidate, the former Secretary of State for Scotland, Michael Moore, has conceded defeat in that seat. One of his two main rivals are to be declared the winner, and if it's the SNP, that will add to their huge tally of seats in this general election. If it's the Conservative, the MSP John Lamont that's successful, and not only will he have a seat in two parliaments, but he'll also be one of two Tory MPs in Scotland, doubling the party's number and meaning that the Tories actually have twice as many Scottish MPs as Labour, if that's how it turns out. We're going to find that out very shortly, but let's carry on the conversation with our panellists. I don't suppose, Stuart Maxwell, you're getting any inside word from that final constituency to declare?
No, I wish I could help you, but no, I haven't heard it. I just checked and I haven't heard a thing.
Now, the SNP has never had a result like this in any election, effectively sweeping the board in Scotland, even more so than your big win in 2011 in the Holyrood vote. What do you think you can achieve with that and with all those MPs?
Well, I think there's a number of things. Well, it will depend on the final result, obviously, whether it's an overall majority. And when I say an overall majority, I mean a proper working majority. I mean a very slim majority of one, I think, makes it very difficult for the Conservative government. But any minority government that's led by David Cameron, I think we can extract a number of things. I think David Cameron is going to have to, no matter what kind of Prime Minister he is going to have to come and speak to Nicola Sturgeon about the Smith Commission and about the powers and about how much further he's now willing to go, because a very clear message has been sent from the voters of Scotland that they want something different, they want something more, they want employment powers, they want powers over the minimum wage, they want a whole raft of powers that wasn't in Smith that really I think we need to actually drive forward our economy, and I think that's one of the things certainly SNP MPs can do. And I think on the interesting thing about the EU referendum question I think is about to dominate over the next year or two is that the argument that Nicola Sturgeon was putting forward
that you have to have effectively a double democratic lock on the vote, that all 4 parts of the UK must vote to come out, if that's the decision, rather than just one part dragging the rest out.
Effectively a veto for Scotland or indeed any other
part.
The 4 nations.
This becomes strengthens that argument, because clearly the vote in Scotland now is very different from it is elsewhere, and I think that now comes into play.
Would that be workable, Margaret Mitchell?
Absolutely, it's bizarre. We've just had a referendum where if SNP had a majority, then they could unilaterally have broken up the UK.
But would it be workable to have a veto for each of the 4 nations?
Absolutely not. We're a united kingdom and we go forward with this region as 4 nations, but as a united kingdom. That's how we go into this referendum.
So even if Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland voted to stay in and England voted to leave, we should leave the European Union in those circumstances?
We go in as a united kingdom.
Let me bring in Professor Charlie Jeffrey. The question of the UK's membership of the EU is clearly going to be a very big issue over the next couple of years. How, first of all, do you see David Cameron's negotiations with the European institutions going?
That's a really, really good question. I wish the Conservative Party could tell us a bit more about that, because in government, in the last Parliament, they did this balance of competences review, which was a systematic review of all of the areas where the EU has powers that were once held by the member state, in order to find out which powers could be returned. And they couldn't find any, or at least they couldn't find any significant powers. It's very, very hard to discern what they would actually like. They appear to want to challenge freedom of movement within the EU, but that would be impossible for most of the other member states to consider. It's very, very difficult to see what Cameron could ask for and have a real prospect of getting.
Although Jean-Claude Juncker, the current president of the EU Commission, has in recent days been indicating that he wants to try and make the UK happy, he wants to give something.
Yeah, that sounds like a few cosmetic concessions. I'm not sure at all that that would satisfy many on the Conservative backbenches. It will be really interesting if Cameron does have a slim majority, how he manages that, because his party, especially on Europe, is not very unified. It could be much more difficult to manage than the coalition was.
We're promising that result from Kelso for the Berwickshire seat, and we think it will come in the next couple of minutes. There's the scene live at the count in Kelso. It's getting ever closer, but while we wait for the returning officer, Brian Taylor.
A couple of little snippets, perhaps. The beast of Bolsover, Dennis Skinner, is back, returned in his constituency, and another swathe of Liberal Democrat seats in England, St Austell, Taunton, Dean, Cheadle, falling to the Conservatives. An indication, it isn't incredible. The Conservatives tempted the Liberal Democrats into government, obliged them to abandon their policy on tuition fees, and now take half their seats as a consequence of the voter anger at that. Isn't politics wonderful?
It's a complicated business. We were talking, of course, about the European Union, Brian, and one thing that we can be fairly sure of is that many of the big corporations that came out against Scottish independence will now do the same and come out against the UK leaving the EU.
And intriguingly, many of those who hold a sort of UKIP-style perspective, including people on the Conservative backbenches in favour of what they believe is the UK, but they really mean to many degrees England, are also the same ones who are very sceptical about the European Union. It is an emerging position to take that situation on the backbenches. I mean, all parties are coalitions of the more or less willing. And eventually that coalition can be strained or can break down. It's happened to parties down the years, and it may now be about to jeopardise the Conservatives with a tiny majority. But hey, it's better than losing.
OK, here is Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk, where we believe the former Secretary of State for Scotland, Michael Moore, has lost the seat. I'm trying to discern from the body language of the SNP and Conservative candidates which one of them has won. Let's find out.
I, Tracy Logan, Returning Officer for the Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk County constituency in the United Kingdom General Election 2015, hereby declare the total number of votes cast is 55,094, the turnout is 74.24%, the total number of votes given for each candidate in this constituency is as follows. Callum Kerr, Scottish National Party, 20,145. John Lamont, Scottish Conservative and Unionist, 19,817. Kenrick Lloyd-Jones, Scottish Labour Party, 2,700. Michael Moore, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 10,294. Peter Nielsen, UK Independence Party, 1,316. Jessie Ray, Independent, 135. Pauline Stewart, Scottish Green Party, 631. I hereby declare that Callum Kerr has been duly elected to serve in the United Kingdom Parliament as the member for the Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk County constituency.
The SNP have taken Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk, taking to 56 the total number of seats that they've won in this UK general election. Callum Kerr, the chair of Yes Borders during the independence referendum campaign, is the winner there. The Conservatives' John Lamont, a member of the Scottish Parliament, finishing in second place. Callum Kerr for the SNP with 20,145 votes. John Lamont just a few hundred votes behind on 19,817. But the MP who's represented that seat until now, Michael Moore, is out of Parliament. The former Secretary of State for Scotland, trailing in third place with just 10,294 seats, losing that seat 50 years after Sir David Steele made the big Liberal breakthrough in the Borders. That service of Liberal representation is now at an end. The SNP with 37% of the votes compared to 36 for the Conservatives. Let's have a listen into the winner, Callum Kerr.
Positive and energetic job done by my own team shows that democracy is alive and well and flourishing here in the Borders. Now, I'd like to send my genuine commiserations to Michael, who has been a diligent and hard-working MP who I know we all respect. Now, defeat cannot be easy for you, Michael, but we owe you our best and we wish you all the best for the future. This has been a fair, decent and civilised campaign here in the Borders, and I think we should all take enormous pride from that. And I'm honoured to have been elected as MP for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk. And I'll be that MP for all of the people of the Borders, no matter how you voted. It says here today, I think it was yesterday. Now, right across this country, north to south, west to east, SNP candidates have won today. The biggest transformation in our country's democratic political history is underway. And I'm immensely proud of my party and my team today. As part of this new team of SNP MPs, I'll now fight for you to end austerity and to bring more powers to Scotland.
OK, that's Callum Kerr, the new MP for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk. That's the last of the 59 Scottish constituencies to declare, with 56 going to the SNP and one each to Labour, the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats. Let's catch up on more election headlines with Jackie Budd.
The Prime Minister, David Cameron, looks set to return to Downing Street with enough MPs to govern alone. He's just arrived in London, heli-tele, following his car all the way from his Oxford constituency, and he headed straight to Tory HQ. Let's just have a look. You see him getting out of the car there with his wife, Samantha, making their way up, no doubt, to say thank you to the hard-working party people who've obviously spent an anxious night there. It was estimated to be a lot closer than it turned out to be. He's expected to come out, emerge and make a speech in a short time from now. In Scotland, the night and the next 5 years at Westminster belongs to the SNP. Let's take a look at the Scottish seats. Well, let's take a look firstly. The total for the SNP, 56 seats, and Labour, just 1 seat. We can dwell on that. Labour, Scotland, the spiritual home of the party. And the rest, the Lib Dems 1 and the Conservatives 1. It's been a record-breaking night in terms of votes. The SNP have broken the previous Scottish record, which was 1.3 million, and they managed to get 1.4 million votes plus. Record-breaking swings here, at least, with an almost 40% swing in Glasgow North East. Here's what the SNP's Westminster leader, Angus Robertson, had to say.
Many people who decided that they want something different, they want something better, and that of course is being replicated right across Scotland, and we're seeing unprecedented shifts in political voting behaviour. It's a political earthquake, it's an electoral tsunami, it's all of these things are being said, but you just have to look at a map to be struck by how much Scotland has changed. I'm not sure politicians at Westminster from the 3 UK parties appreciate just how fundamental this change actually is.
And finally, the former Chief Secretary to the Treasury and former MP Danny Alexander, speaking perhaps for many of his former Lib Dem colleagues who had a brutal night across the UK, and perhaps for most of Scotland's Labour MPs, said this. Let's hope he does. That's all from me for now. I'm back this evening on Reporting Scotland, live from Westminster, where there'll be an awful lot to talk about. Back to you, Glenn.
Thanks very much indeed for all your updates throughout the night, Jackie. And let's keep the conversation going as the general election across the UK continues to unfold and David Cameron edges closer to potentially a working majority in the House of Commons. Of course, in those circumstances, Charlie Jeffrey, his backbenchers would become much more powerful because he would need to keep them sweet in order to prevent rebellions and prevent him losing that majority.
Yeah, every party internally is a coalition of different groups and different ideas. And we know from not just the last Parliament, but the ones before that, that MPs at Westminster have become more rebellious, less inclined to accept the party whip and do what they're told. I think this will be a real challenge. It looks like 329 is the latest forecast that we have for the Conservatives, so clearly over that boundary mark to get an absolute majority, but so tight. You need to lose 2 or 3 people, 2 or 3 of the awkward squad on any vote, and you've lost your majority. So it's going to be very, very difficult for the Prime Minister.
OK, let's just summarise the UK picture with our political editor, Brian Taylor. Brian.
Glenn, thanks very much indeed. You'll recall that we started the night with a Conservative government, Conservative-led government. We're going to end the night heading in that same direction as well. There are the figures. Let's take a look, first of all, at the basic figures there as things stand at the moment. The Conservatives on 277, that's up 19. Labour down 25 on 217. The SNP, that quite staggering total of 56. That is up 50, of course, on the night. And the Liberal Democrats currently on 8. They may add a few to those, but they really have been losing seats in the last wee while to the Conservatives in particular. Plaid Cymru on 3, UKIP on 1, and skip down a little bit. The others, primarily, of course, from Northern Ireland on 18. So David Cameron heading for government again, literally going back to Downing Street, heading for government again, awaiting for the call from the palace suggesting that he might fancy another go at it. But take a look across at the other side here of the map of the United Kingdom. It is disparate and variegated across England, Wales and even Northern Ireland. It is one uniform yellow with a couple of dots of other colour across Scotland. This has been truly, truly a remarkable outcome. Look at that picture there, yellow across the whole of Scotland. Charlie Kennedy has gone, Douglas Alexander has gone, Danny Alexander has gone, Jim Murphy has gone, umpteen seats falling to the SNP tide, the whole of Glasgow, all 7, the Magnificent 7, as Nicola Sturgeon is calling them, for the SNP. Now, we are hearing people say that this will be a problem for Nicola Sturgeon in that it'll be an alternative power base in the Commons. I guess the other parties wish they had that problem. We are hearing it said that David Cameron will face difficulties in sustaining such a tight majority in the House of Commons, which is true. But I guess the other parties would wish they had those problems as well, Glenn.
Yeah, I bet they do. Thanks very much indeed, our political editor, Brian Taylor, with the latest from across the UK. And Paul Sinclair, from a Labour perspective, a much worse night than you might have imagined, given that the opinion polls until yesterday were saying the Conservatives and Labour were neck and neck, and in those circumstances normally that would mean Labour would finish ahead of the Tories.
Absolutely. I mean, a devastating night. The one thing I would say about the polls, and I don't know how this reflects in the polling industry, but I did feel going into this it was a little bit like the referendum, because there came a point in the last week of the referendum where they all clustered round it was too close to call, and it ended up not being too close to call. And I think that there clearly has been quite a shift, and shy Tories coming out. That wasn't factored in. So no, it has been a night of shocks north and south of the border.
But yet it was said that in this election, tactical voting, largely against the SNP, might save many more Labour, Lib Dem MPs in Scotland. Did that not happen, or just not to the sort of extent that could see off the huge swings that the SNP have enjoyed in many of the seats that they've won?
I think the only place where it obviously happened is in Ian Murray's seat in that victory. If you look even at Berwickshire, there's a very healthy Liberal Democrat vote. If just a couple of hundred had gone across, that had been a Tory victory. So no, I don't think there was as much tactical voting as we thought. I have to say there might be a few former colleagues reflecting upon the fact that if they had supported yes to AV, they might be in their jobs.
AV, a system of proportional representation that was rejected in the referendum. Those pictures from Kelso in the aftermath of that final declaration from there with the Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk result. I wonder about Edinburgh South, Stuart Maxwell, from an SNP point of view. You didn't manage to win there. Labour held on in what was their seat with the slimmest majority anywhere in Scotland. They only had a majority of 300 odd votes. Why do you think the SNP couldn't win there? Was it the controversy surrounding your candidate, Neil Hay, and some of the things he had tweeted using a pseudonym?
Well, I mean,
pseudonym.
I don't know, even a pseudonym, yes. I don't know the details of that particular seat, Edinburgh South, that well, but I suspect it's a combination of two things. I suspect Paul's quite right, there was some tactical voting that went on there, perhaps there was larger amounts there than elsewhere, but also there is no doubt that must have had an impact. The media coverage of the storm around some tweets that Neil Hay was supposed to have put out. So,
the language of which was condemned by your party leader.
Absolutely, and quite rightly so. So, I mean, effectively, if you live by the tweet, then you die by it as well. And I'm afraid that unfortunately seems to be of what may have happened here in Edinburgh South, because it is so different from all of the other seats. You have to assume that has had an impact.
OK, thanks very much indeed for the moment. It is 25 minutes to 8 on Friday, the 8th of May 2015. It's the morning after the election night before, and as David Cameron edges towards an overall majority for the Conservative Party and the SNP celebrate picking up 56 of Scotland's 59 seats and a near wipeout for the other political parties, let's bring you all the big overnight action from Andrew Kerr.
I declare that Mary Black is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the
An extraordinary night in Scottish politics, a record-breaking night. Labour's Shadow Foreign Secretary Douglas Alexander ousted by 20-year-old Mary Black, now the youngest MP.
I would like to thank all the other candidates for their participation, and in particular, whilst I appreciate that this is a blow for Douglas Alexander, I truly hope he will remain to see his future in politics once he is recovered from this result.
Nearby, a short time later, the Scottish Labour leadership was decapitated. Jim Murphy, in the post for 5 months, toppled by surging SNP.
I give public notice that Kirsten Francis Oswald is duly elected as a Member of Parliament for the East Renfrewshire constituency.
It's proven hard to turn round years of difficulty with the Scottish Labour Party in just 5 short months. Tonight, Scotland has lost so many great Members of Parliament from all across the country, and I'd like to pay tribute to each and every one of them. There will be more to say about this and what it means for Scotland in the days to come. But for me personally, and for the Scottish Labour Party, the fight goes on and our cause continues.
Like Skittles, Labour seats fell one after another with incredible swings to the SNP, 39% in Glasgow North East. One former Labour MP says Jim Murphy should go.
Clearly, if he ceases to be an MP, then obviously he can no longer remain as leader just on technical grounds, but morally, as the man who's led us to the biggest ever disaster that Labour has suffered in Scotland, or indeed, I think probably anywhere, if not anywhere in the world, then of course he can't continue.
The SNP leader, Nicola Sturgeon, hailed her magnificent 7 in Glasgow, a clean nationalist sweep in the city.
I think a good night for Scotland as well. The tectonic plates of Scottish politics have clearly shifted. What we're seeing, I think, is a historic shift in Scottish political opinion. It hasn't happened overnight, not even in the last 7 months since the referendum, although I think that's accelerated the process. But Labour's been losing the trust of people in Scotland now over a period of years.
Hard graft has paid off, and the Sturgeon's proud parents were keeping an eye on their daughter in Ayrshire.
The last time we saw Nicola was Easter Sunday, and so after this tonight I don't know when we'll actually speak to her face to face again.
So I can therefore declare that Alex Salmond is duly elected to serve in the UK Parliament as the member for the Gordon constituency.
Nicola Sturgeon's old boss, Alex Salmond, safely won in Gordon and had this message.
There is a swing underway in Scotland, the like of which has not been seen in recorded politics. It is twice the level of any swing recorded in Scotland or indeed across the United Kingdom since electoral records began in 1835. It is an extraordinary statement of intent from the people of Scotland. The Scottish lion has roared this morning across the country.
Ian Blackford is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the Ross Skye and Lochaber constituency.
After 32 years as an MP, the former Liberal Democrat leader Charles Kennedy lost Ross Skye and Lochaber.
I'm very fond of political history, and tonight, if nothing else, we can all consider and reflect in years to come, perhaps tell our grandchildren, we were there the night of the long skiing doos.
The Lib Dems' Jo Swinson had hoped to hold Eastern Bartonshire. She too was drowned by the rising SNP. Alistair Carmichael did hold his seat in Orkney and Shetland. But another major scalp was claimed as Danny Alexander lost his in Inverness just before 6 a.m. A terrible night for the party.
Well, it's been a very tough election, and look, a lot of us have been swept away by this tidal wave of nationalism that's taken over many constituencies in Scotland, and we all have to reflect on that in a sense.
But the Conservatives clung on to David Mundell's seats.
I would very much like some colleagues. Nobody wants that more than me. I didn't 10 years ago envisage being the only Conservative MP in Scotland, but it's something that I do with great pride.
The number of ballot papers
but the Conservatives are on their own, failing to win in Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk. The SNP ousting Lib Dem Michael Moore. A lonely Ian Murray was elected as the Labour MP for Edinburgh South. A crisis for Scottish Labour, for Ed Miliband and perhaps the Union.
And I also want to say that the next government has a huge responsibility. It has a huge responsibility in facing the very difficult task of keeping our country together. Whatever party we come from, if we believe in the United Kingdom, we should stand up for people in every part of our United Kingdom.
But this night belongs to the Scottish nationalists, an extraordinary night of triumph.
507.
Andrew Kerr with some of the big moments from the overnight counts and declarations. We're just hearing from Brighton Pavilion that the Greens' Caroline Lucas has retained that seat in the face of a strong Labour challenge. There's the result from Brighton Pavilion. Caroline Lucas winning with 22,871 votes. Labour actually quite far behind Purna Sen with 14,904 votes. A majority for Caroline Lucas of 7,967 on a 71% turnout in Brighton Pavilion. That is, and I think is likely to remain, the only Green constituency in this general election. Now, we were following David Cameron on his journey back to Downing Street, and there he is, walking along that famous street with his wife, heading back to the big black door and inside number 10. Michael Moore, as Secretary of State for Scotland, walked through that door many times as a member of David Cameron's cabinet in the last government. He lost that office and in the last hour has lost his seat in Parliament. Commiserations on that result. You came third behind the Conservatives and the winning SNP candidate. The night of the long ski and do's was how Charlie Kennedy put it. Is that how it feels for you?
It's been a very difficult night for the party. The length and breadth of the country, there are individual factors in our local seats, but there are some big national trends that you have very well covered through the night, Glenn. Look, Cam Kerr and the SNP here in the Borders fought a fantastic campaign, really outdid everybody else, and I hope and wish Cam all the best in his term as Member of Parliament for this great constituency. It's been my privilege to represent these last 18 years. For us as Liberals, we're going to have to reflect on what happened overnight. Some of this was signalled year after year in the course of the coalition, but we were there, we took difficult decisions. We now need to make sure we can refashion liberalism in Scotland and across the UK to make ourselves relevant once again to the voters of the country.
And your defeat brings to an end a 50-year tradition of Liberal representation in and around the area that you've been representing. Was it a mistake, do you think, to go into coalition government with the Conservative Party?
There will be plenty of people who will offer that up as an easy answer, but the alternative 5 years ago I think would have been bad for the country if we'd not had stability in government at the time when we had the biggest financial deficit on the government books we'd ever had, when the world economy was in a very fragile place. So yes, we took some difficult decisions, we probably made some quite big mistakes at times. However, I think we were right to be in coalition and to see it through to the end. What goes forward now, of course, is a time for us to reflect and to reinvent ourselves as Liberals with a strong voice in Scotland and the rest of the UK, I hope, because I do believe we need to have Liberal values at the heart of our politics in this country.
If the election of so many SNP MPs is not, as Nicola Sturgeon says, a vote for another referendum on independence, what is it and what should the UK's response be?
The danger after tonight will be that we've got a powerful bloc of SNP members of Parliament going to Westminster, our strengthened Conservative Party south of the border, and these two will stare across the Commons at each other and not be willing to do business. Now, we heard some very fine words from all the party leaders, but particularly from Nicola Sturgeon and from the Prime Minister, saying that we would work together, we'd do what was right for Scotland, that the SNP MPs would reach out and do their bit for the United Kingdom. I hope that's right, because right now, with the economy still in a fairly fragile state, with the constitutional situation so uncertain, we need everybody to work together, not to clash and push the countries apart. Testing times, and for the SNP and the Conservatives particularly, to rise to the challenge.
To thanks very much indeed. We're going to go to Len Tingle for details of the recount in Ed Ball's seat. Len Tingle. Len Tingle at the Morley and Outwood count. I understand there has been a recount there. Any word on a declaration?
Well, no word yet, but they've been counting for some time now. You join me very much as the Shadow Chancellor's future is in the balance. This is the count going on behind me here. This is his Morley and Outwood seat. Last time around, he won it with a slender majority of just about 1,100. We understand that at the end of the first count, and you kind of have to watch the body language, but we understand that at the end of the first count, his opponent, the Conservative Andrea Jenkins, was a little way ahead, and that's why the recount was ordered. Now, we're expecting that recount to finish. Could be another half hour or so. I mean, we're getting on to 10 to 8 here. That's a very, very long time. It's been a nail-biting time for the Shadow Chancellor, and what we're seeing here could decide exactly where his future is.
Len, thanks very much indeed for the update, and of course we'll bring you that result live when it comes in. And, of course, many people making their way to their beds after a very, very long night of politics and counting. Many more, though, getting up and having to go to work. And Keradine Idizan is at Glasgow Central Station, where he's been meeting some commuters. Keradine.
Yes, the morning commuters here at Glasgow Central Station just digesting the news overnight. There's been some really glum Labour faces, some very happy SNP voters, I can tell. I was talking to a couple of taxi drivers, both of whom voted SNP just outside Central Station. They were telling me that all that the passengers have been talking about in the run-up to the election was that they were going to vote SNP, that some of them used to be Labour voters, and that they were going to switch. And it's amazing to think that the trains that used to depart here from Glasgow Central Station would have cut a swathe through the Labour heartlands. It was all red on the political map, wasn't it? And that has all changed now. Let's speak to a couple of guys who are on the 8 o'clock down to Liverpool. Gents, if you just introduce yourselves first of all.
My name's Gordon Whitelaw.
Gordon, hi.
Hi, I'm Neil Dixon.
Neil, hello. And Gordon, if you don't mind me asking, how did you vote?
I voted SNP.
And you voted?
Conservative.
So we have an SNP voter and a Conservative voter. First of all, to the SNP voter, you must be thrilled.
Yeah, very pleased. I think it was a really good result. I'm not a traditional SNP voter, but I thought there had to be a change. I don't think Labour was really doing anything in Scotland, and there had to be a change.
And what do you think this is going to mean now? I mean,
it's a huge. I think for Scotland, particularly, it's going to be a huge change, obviously, and for the whole of the United Kingdom, and it could lead to another possible referendum. I'm sure it must, because they have to take note of the situation in Scotland now.
And in terms of the Conservatives, David Cameron looks like he can stay in place and form the next government.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if they do get a majority, then what they've done for the economy in the past 5 years has been incredible. So I'm delighted if that's the case, that they do get the majority.
And is that why they secured your vote?
Absolutely, yeah. Probably more George Osborne's work than David Cameron's.
And the Tory vote in Scotland pretty much held firm as well. Not a bad night for Ruth Davidson.
No, and Ruth Davidson's actually been a very good voice for Conservatives in Scotland, and far better than Annabel Golding, represented herself very well.
Now, you guys are on a stag trip, I think, down in Liverpool. There's going to be lots of political chat, isn't there? I mean,
it's not mine, by the way.
It's not yours. I think it's your son.
My son's, yes.
Who's also an SNP voter. So what do you think the chat, the talk is going to be on the way down? It's all going to be about the election and what it means now.
Are you being serious? I don't know how much political chat there'll be, but there'll be a bit, I suppose, yeah. But because we're kind of divided a little bit, a couple of Tory voters, and most people are SNP, but when I really think that, I don't think there's that many traditional SNP voters that necessarily voted for the SNP. I don't think the alternative was there. I mean, most people wouldn't vote Tory, with respect, in Scotland, but Labour has done nothing and they're a spent force in Scotland. So I don't know how much of it. I mean, I'm not a traditional SNP voter, as I said, but there was no alternative really to voting SNP. So I don't know how that's going to go in the future.
So it looks like it's going to be a Conservative government with a strong SNP voice. They're saying a strong voice for Scotland at Westminster.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing for Scotland as well. You know, for the economy general and for the UK general, I think Conservatives a good vote. For Scotland, for SNP to get in or have as many seats as they've got and to remain in government in Scotland as they are, is also a good thing for Scotland, and I hope they can fight their corner very well for us.
Gentlemen, thank you both very much indeed. Behave yourselves down in Liverpool, will you? Have a good weekend. That is the word here from a very happy SNP voter and a fairly happy Conservative voter as well from Glasgow Central Station. Back to you for the moment.
OK, well, let's go from Ceredigion, thanks very much indeed, to a happy winning candidate in Kelso, the new MP for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk, Callum Kerr. There must have been a few nail-biting minutes, if not even hours, as the recount unfolded, Callum.
Hours, yes, many hours, which really tested the staff here to their limits, and they came through with flying colours. Very impressive display by all of the team here, and absolutely delighted that we've been successful and I've been selected as the MP for the area.
Well, congratulations on your win. You were the last MP in Scotland to be elected and the last of 56 for the SNP. And I've been asking a number of your fellow nationalist MPs, what difference will that bloc make in the House of Commons, given that we are now fairly sure that we'll have a majority Conservative government?
Well, it's a fantastic night for us across Scotland, and in particular here in the Borders. And I think the significance of the SNP representation from every corner is really important as we take our positive message, our anti-austerity message, down to London. The people here have asked for change. They've voted for change. They believe in a fairer, better Scotland. So we have a responsibility to take that message to London and work with the team down there in whatever situation exists down there to deliver for the people of the Borders and Scotland.
Callum, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for taking the extra time to stay up and to chat, and congratulations again on your win. Now, let's introduce our panel. Stuart Maxwell for the SNP is still with us. Struan Stevenson, former Conservative Euro MP, is here. Douglas Fraser, the BBC's economy editor, business and economy editor in Scotland. And Kevin McKenna, who's a columnist with The Observer. Welcome all. Kevin McKenna, if we can start with you. I think you surprised even yourself during the independence referendum campaign that you came out in favour of a yes vote. Do you think that the 56 SNP MPs bring independence any closer?
Yes. I think that there were 3 steps that had to be negotiated before we could even consider the reality of an independence referendum 2. This is the first one, and actually it's probably exceeded the best guesses of even the most ardent nationalists. The second is next year, if the SNP can maintain an overall majority. And
in the Scottish Parliament.
In the Scottish Parliament. And of course we're in another constitutional, we're facing another constitutional issue, because I would fully expect in the next year or so, given that the Conservatives are expected to get an overall majority, that there will be an in-out vote on Europe. Now, all of this, especially if England votes to come out of Europe and Scotland doesn't, then there will be, if Nicola Sturgeon herself isn't, there will certainly be very significant pressure from within the SNP to say that all of those together is what you would call a popular mandate in anyone's book for a second independence referendum. And then Nicola Sturgeon has a big decision, because the second independence referendum will be the last one. I think everyone accepts that. And
because it'll be successful, or because if it isn't successful, you couldn't have another one?
If it's not successful, there'll be no appetite in the country for another one, and therefore she has to get the timing of it right.
OK, Douglas Fraser, if David Cameron is true to his word and intends to govern in a way that will keep the United Kingdom together, what does he have to do in these circumstances to prevent Kevin McKenna's prophecy come true?
Well, he's got to manage a very, very tight majority for a start off. We've been talking a bit about the problems he's got with his own backbenchers, about the European vote, which is coming up, I think, at the back half of 2017, which is going to focus an awful lot of attention and energy, and it's going to be very, very difficult for him to do that at the same time as watching what's happening in Scotland. And trying to, I mean, George Osborne will want to push forward the Northern Powerhouse aspect of devolving power within England. As Stuart Maxwell was saying earlier, he's got to meet Nicola Sturgeon at some point and say, right, you have a mandate for something. What do you want that to be? She has said it will not be for an independence referendum. She was absolutely clear about that, though she will now be under pressure from those who support independence, her 100,000 plus members, to put that into next year's Holyrood manifesto, which may cause problems, because at the time it may not be right for her to do that, and it may limit the votes if that's seen to be what's coming around next time.
OK, but I'm trying to get to the bottom of what David Cameron could realistically do in terms of making some sort of offer to Nicola Sturgeon and the Scottish Government on powers that might head off.
Well, you can pick up the SNP manifesto. I looked quite close to the back of it, and the words full fiscal responsibility. And he says, well, this is in your manifesto. You have a fantastic mandate from Scottish voters. On you go. You have it. The Conservatives can introduce it as fast as possible. And that brings back this figure of £7.6 billion, which for all the votes that the SNP have managed to amass yesterday, hasn't gone away.
And for those who don't follow it closely, the £7.6 billion is?
This is the additional deficit on Scottish spending and taxation, in addition to the deficit that the UK is already facing. And while the Tories will want to bear down with some quite harsh cuts over the next 3 years to surplus the deficit in Scotland, because spending remains relatively high, because oil and gas revenue continues to fall away, that deficit gets actually bigger. Now, there will be tax powers coming to Scotland next year anyway, more coming from the Smith Commission. It could be that with full fiscal responsibility, you get the full range of tax powers, including oil and gas. There's still a gap there, and it was pretty clear from the campaign that Nicola Sturgeon and others want those powers, but just not yet, because they don't know how they're going to fill that gap.
Yeah, they talked about a transition which, if I interpreted John Swinney, the Deputy First Minister, right, he seemed to be talking about that over 7 to 10 years.
They would phase it in such a way that it wouldn't cause any pain. Well, good luck with that.
OK, well, Stuart Stevenson, you've talked enthusiastically in the past about a big transfer of financial power, of tax and spending powers from Westminster to Holyrood. Would full fiscal responsibility be the answer in your view?
No, but we've achieved that with the Smith Commission. That's exactly the road that we asked to go down. The Scottish Parliament now will be one of the most powerful devolved parliaments anywhere in the world, with all the powers that will be transferred.
But you know perfectly well the SNP want the full suite. They want corporation tax and capital gains tax and all the rest.
As Douglas just said, we have to fill this £7.6 billion black hole. You know, if we'd voted for independence 8 months ago, we would have been bankrupt in year one. You know, the collapse in the oil price, which the SNP refused to accept.
OK, well, let me ask the question in a different way, because despite all of those arguments being put, both in the independence referendum and subsequently as the oil price has gone down, the SNP have 56 of the 59 seats in Scotland. So how should David Cameron respond in a way that would help him achieve his goal, his stated goal, of keeping the United Kingdom together?
Well, first of all, he should say, we've just had the referendum on independence. Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond promised that it would be a lifetime or at least a generational vote. We've had that. We should stop wasting our time concentrating on the constitutional issues and get back to the things that people are worried about: jobs, health, education, which have actually slid because the SNP took their eye off the ball in Scotland. So we've done worse in extra funding for the NHS. We've done worse in literacy for our children and education in Scotland because we were completely focused on independence. For heaven's sake, we're not going to start that nonsense again within a year of the last referendum.
So the answer to these results is, let's not talk about the Constitution anymore.
The answer to these results is we have to say, OK, you've got 56 seats in Scotland. I find it amazing that I'm sitting here as a Conservative and we have the same number of seats in Scotland as the Labour Party I never in my lifetime thought that I would see that. So of course we have to address this major issue. I think it means probably we have to accept there should be more funding for certain aspects of Scotland, for education, for health. This is what will make a difference for people in Scotland. But don't go down the constitutional avenue again. The people of Scotland are fed up with that.
I'm not sure what the offer is in all of that, but maybe that needs much more thought. Stuart Maxwell, amongst other things, Struan Stevenson has pointed out that the SNP do appear to have broken their pledge that the independence referendum was at least a once-in-a-generation event.
Well, as far as I'm aware, we haven't announced a second referendum, so I don't think we have broken any pledge. But the fact is, what Nicola has said is quite clear. I mean, at the end of the day, the decision about whether or not there is a second referendum will be entirely up to the people of Scotland. They'll decide. Even if we did put it in a manifesto, people of Scotland could say we don't want it.
Literacy figures very recently were not good enough. The First Minister herself said that after 8 years of an SNP government. Have you taken your eye off the ball?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Struan's arguing a case that he's just fundamentally lost overnight. So clearly, the people of Scotland have made their decision absolutely clear. They absolutely want SNP MPs to speak strongly for Scotland. I think it's very clear they want additional powers. I think that's the negotiating position we will take, going down to London to speak to the Prime Minister of what we're assuming now is a Conservative majority government. But the fact remains that effectively people of Scotland, in every opinion poll, every survey that's ever been taken, have always said they want many, many more powers than ever has been offered through Smith Commission or any of the parties, UK parties. So I think there's a way to go with these discussions.
OK, well, there's a way to go in this general election, and our conversation will continue. But let's go out and about once again. Rachel Massey is at the bakery with the early morning commuters in Aberdeen. Who's with you now, Rachel?
Good morning, welcome back to Thane's Bakery here in Aberdeen. Now, last time we spoke, I mentioned the buttery, and just to show you, I've got one here. Now, if you're from Peterhead, like me, then maybe you call this a cookie. If you're from Banff, you call it a rowie. Either way, I call it absolutely delicious, and I'll be tucking into that after this live. Now, someone who's come in for his breakfast is Jamie Miller. Jamie, hello, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Now, can you just tell me how you voted in the election?
I voted SNP. I
Why?
was kind of hoping for a positive change in Scotland. I think Nicola Sturgeon came across really well in the live debates. A bit more of a positive message than the other parties.
So are you quite happy after this morning's results?
Yes and no. It's kind of bittersweet. I'm glad that the SNP have done well, but looks like Conservative are way to get in a power, which I don't know will be a great thing for Scotland or UK as a whole.
But do you not think that maybe the SNP can have more say and maybe have more say down in Westminster?
Yeah, certainly hope so. Hopefully they'll get some sort of influence, yes, with, was it 56 MPs? I hope so, yeah.
And so what happens now? Because over the next few days a lot of deals might be made. What would you like to see happen?
Hopefully now with the referendum they'll be held accountable to what they said in their pledges beforehand, and they'll stick to it, and the SNP can force that through.
Now, you mentioned the referendum. Do you think that Scotland's become more politicised since the referendum, in particular for you?
Certainly, I think it's awakened people. People take a lot more interest in politics now, especially in Scotland, and people are a bit more aware.
And did that change? Did that have an impact on how you voted in this election?
I think it did. I wasn't too sure. And again, I think the leaders' debates swayed me quite a lot. I think Nicola Sturgeon came across quite well in debates. Again, a bit more positive instead of just cuts, austerity. I think that's what's definitely swayed me.
So what would be your biggest fear as kind of the deals are brokered over the next few days? What would you really hate to see happen?
I'd hate to see NHS broken up, more cuts on the poor and the less well off. I think with this as well, I don't think the Conservatives should be congratulating themselves saying they've done a great job. I think it's more to do with weak Labour that they've gone to power more than anything else.
Excellent, thank you very much. I'll leave you to go have your breakfast, and I think I might go have my breakfast as well. So I'll be hanging around here speaking to some more folks about the election results.
Well, you enjoy your buttery, Rachel. Starting to feel a wee bit hungry myself. Any chance of a bacon roll, Brian?
I think the bacon rolls apparently have vanished, Glenn. I think the point has been reached in the evening where the interest in politics is beginning to wane and move over to the interest in sustenance. But no doubt that will change as more results come in.
Well, plenty more politics to talk about. Professor Charlie Jeffrey, do you think either the SNP or the Conservatives were prepared for the scenario that's now emerging?
We're in an extraordinary situation. We couldn't have imagined that we can now say of 3 political parties in Scotland that there are more pandas than their MPs. It is completely unexpected in that sense. So we have this huge SNP bloc now going down to Westminster, facing the unexpected sight of a Conservative majority. I don't think either party really calculated that as a possible outcome of the election. I think we saw from various SNP politicians over the course of the night a sense of, well, what, we have to talk with the Conservatives now. That wasn't part of the plan. I don't think that's clear for the SNP. I don't think it's clear for the Conservatives either. We heard a little bit from David Cameron about implementing Smith. We heard a little bit from Boris Johnson about federalism, whatever that might mean. I don't think either party has yet got its head around this situation. Could be quite interesting to see if a deal does emerge around an extended form of devolution, because it could well be in the interests of both of those parties to come to an arrangement.
Why so?
Why so? An extended form of devolution to Scotland could also have as a corollary the institutionalisation of England in some way in the UK political system. And if you do that, that's something that favours the Conservative Party.
Well, George Osborne, the Chancellor, has said that the government must do more to make Scots feel part of the United Kingdom. Any idea what he might have meant by that, Struan Stevenson?
Well, I mean, we've got the controversy over evil English votes for English laws, and I find it extraordinary that people in Scotland, particularly from the SNP, were arguing that, you know, this is an outrage, you can't possibly go down that road. I mean, why are we allowed to have all of the additional powers for our devolved parliament that the Smith Commission is going to give us, but apparently England can't have that?
But it's not a mirror image, is it? It's not devolution for England. It's a different system which would have English MPs deciding on English-only issues and then a vote of the full UK Parliament.
Yeah.
But where there's money decisions made in England, that has a direct knock-on effect in Scotland, doesn't it?
On the other hand, the Smith Commission is giving a lot more power to the Scottish Parliament on how to raise money and how to spend it. And I think there'll be a lot more responsibility. Believe me now, the focus is very much going to be in the SNP before the Holyrood elections next year. People will watch closely what these 56 MPs do. If they're beginning to cause the kind of trouble that looks like it would break up the UK, if they think that's their role down in Westminster, I think people will begin to back off from supporting the SNP.
Kevin McKenna, how do you think that group will conduct themselves at Westminster, and how much scrutiny will they come under?
I think Struan's making a good point, possibly a different emphasis than I would put on it. There are 56, many of them, several of them at least, will be unknown quantities, not only to us, but also to the party. Even as we're speaking, party managers will be looking over CVs, mining their backgrounds, looking for evidence of their ability to speak. And over the course of the next year, especially in the run-up to the Holyrood elections, which are very, very vitally important to the SNP and to those people in the party who do want a second independence referendum, these 56 MPs, or many of the new ones, will be there on approval, and there will be a lot of scrutiny of their performance, their ability to speak, where they intervene, their originality, how they comport themselves. Are they fit to represent Scotland in the mother of all parliaments, as is claimed by the British establishment? And that may have a material effect on how people vote and how they're regarded in the run-up to 2016 in Scotland. So even if they do not have as much input to big decisions as they would have liked before this, it's still very important that they perform well.
OK, let's go to Rochester and Stroud in the next few moments, where Mark Reckless, the former Conservative MP who converted that to a UKIP seat in a by-election. Let's see if he manages to hold it at the general election.
Officer for the constituency. hereby give notice that the number of votes given for each candidate is as follows. Prue Bray, Liberal Democrat, 1251. Daniel John Terence Byrne, Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition, 202. Clive Bryn Malcolm Gregory, Green Party, 1516. Nushaba Parveen Khan, Labour Party, 10,396. Mark John Reckless, UK Independence Party, UKIP, 16,009. And Kelly Jane Tolhurst, the Conservative Party candidate, 23,142. That was 23,142. And declare that Kelly Jane Tolhurst has been elected as the Member of Parliament for the constituency of Rochester and Stroud.
One Rochester and Stroud. The constituency won for the Tories 5 years ago by Mark Reckless, stays Conservative, but he has been booted out after a short period serving in that constituency as a UKIP member after causing a by-election following his defection to the UK Independence Party. The Conservatives holding that seat with 23,142 votes, against 16,009 for Mark Reckless. And so UKIP fail to take a second seat in the UK Parliament, although we're still awaiting news of the Thanet South constituency where Nigel Farage is standing. In Rochester and Stroud, 44% of the vote going Conservative, 30% to UKIP, 20% to Labour. A majority for the Tories there of more than 7,000 on a turnout of 66%. Tories down 5, UKIP up 30, but as I say, there's been a by-election in between the last general election and this one. Labour down 9, Lib Dems down 14. And the swing, notional swing of 0% between UKIP and the Conservatives. We're waiting also for the result of the recount in Morley and Outwood, which is the seat won at the last election, held at the last election by Ed Balls, the Shadow Chancellor, and he has acknowledged that he's got a fight in his hands there. It's obviously close, that's why there are recounts. I wonder what the prospects for Mr Ed Balls might be, Douglas Fraser. What do you think?
Well, clearly he's got a very tight fight, and with the prospect of a recount. But the other prospects for him are within the party. What happens when you've decapitated the Shadow Foreign Secretary and the Shadow Chancellor, and Ed Miliband has to go and make a speech now which may involve resignation later today. I would certainly expect Nick Clegg to be standing down as leader of the Liberal Democrats, judging by the hint he dropped earlier on. There's a lot of decapitation at the top of the Labour Party.
And Ed Balls would have been an obvious candidate, would be if he gets back into the House of Commons
he did come
to
across
replace Ed Miliband.
He was pretty toxic. I mean, if you watch the Question Time, as you did, obviously, because you were on the Scottish end of it, but the Question Time from Leeds, Ed Balls was toxic in England because of his association with the spending problems before the crash. And I think that was a problem for him when he did stand against Ed Miliband. So we may be looking at a couple of party leadership contests coming up. I mean, Yvette Cooper, in fact, Mrs Ed Balls, may be one of the people to watch.
OK, well, we'll watch that closely. And as I say, we'll bring you the result from there as soon as the declaration comes in. I mean, just looking at the wider UK picture, Struan Stevenson, what difference will it make for David Cameron to have an overall majority and not have to rely on deals and compromises with his coalition partners, the Liberal Democrats?
Well, I have to say, I have been predicting this for months. Even my own family were saying to me, oh, no, you're wrong. All the opinion polls show it's neck and neck. I'm not usually a gambler, but I did put 25 quid on this, on Cameron having an overall majority. And I've been proved right. Now, it will make a terrific difference. We no longer have to ameliorate some of the policies that would help to get us out of the hole that we've done spectacular work in the coalition. But if we had gone further with our full manifesto from the last election, we'd have been further out of the hole that Labour left us in by now.
But your opponents would say many people at the poorer end of the earning spectrum would have been even harder done by under those circumstances. That was the argument the Lib Dems made in this general election campaign.
We have created almost a miraculous recovery. We have more people in employment, more people in jobs than ever before in Britain. We've done better than any other country in the developed world in economic recovery. So that's why people have voted for the Conservatives.
OK, let's find out if Ed Balls is back or not.
After a recount. I, Tom Reardon, Acting Returning Officer for the Morley and Outwood constituency, declare that the total number of votes given to each candidate was as follows. Balls, Ed, Labour and Cooperative Party, 18,354. Craven, Arnie, Yorkshire First, 479. Jews, David Allen, UK Independence Party, UKIP, 7,951. Hemingway, Martin Francis, Green Party, 1,264. Jenkins, Andrea Marie, the Conservative Party candidate, 18,776. Taylor, Rebecca Elizabeth, Liberal Democrats, 1,426. Therefore, I give public notice that Andrea Marie Jenkins is duly elected as the Conservative Party candidate, Member of Parliament for the Morley and Outwood constituency.
Well, there have been many big shocks for Labour in Scotland, but that must be the biggest for Labour south of the border tonight. Ed Balls, the Shadow Chancellor, has lost his highly marginal West Yorkshire constituency of Morley and Outwood to the Conservatives. He's out of Parliament, replaced by Andrea Jenkins for the Conservatives in a very close contest. 18,776 votes for the Conservatives. Labour's Ed Balls in second with 18,354, a majority for the Tories of only 422 on a turnout of 63%. The Labour team no doubt wishing they'd worked harder and got more of their vote out. 39% of it going to the Conservatives, 39% of all the votes cast going Conservative, 38% to Labour, UKIP on 16%. And there's the change on last time. The Conservative vote up 4, Labour up fractionally, but a big lift in the UKIP vote and a big drop in the Lib Dem vote.
Thank you.
So a swing in Morley and Outwood from Labour to the Conservatives of just 2%, but Ed Balls was defending a very slim majority of 1,101, and he's lost out. He's lost his seat and lost the chance of playing a leading role for Labour in the next Parliament, albeit that would have been a role continuing in opposition. So there's the picture across the UK as a whole, with the Conservatives quite firmly in the lead with 304 seats at this stage. And I think I'm right in saying, Charlie Jeffrey, that we are currently predicting, is it 329? An overall majority?
Yeah.
An overall majority for the Conservatives. And Brian Taylor, in those circumstances, David Cameron is going to have a much freer hand to set the agenda in the next Parliament, but will have to be mindful, as we were discussing with Charlie Jeffrey earlier, of keeping his backbenchers on side, because they're now more powerful.
Particularly when in the next Parliament there's going to have to be a referendum on the European Union, which will engender interest in that, engender enthusiasm among the Eurosceptics on the Conservative backbenches, and all of that adds up to problems for David Cameron. But I say again, it is the problem of government rather than the problem of opposition. Ed Balls, isn't it ironic, the guy that was in charge of the sums for the Labour Party, the arithmetic has just come down on the wrong side for him. Another little tiny thing, this captures one key point, which is, yes, part of Labour's decline across the UK is due to losing many seats in Scotland, but you can't blame the SNP for Morley going to the Conservative Party. That is down to the Labour Party in England.
Let's take a look at the UKIP leader, Nigel Farage, who is speaking to media in Thanet South. We'll find out what's happening with him, but let's hear from Ed Balls.
And so thank you to you for all staying on to finish this job here today. Thank you. And let me start by saying to my political opponents in Westminster, congratulations, and in particular to thank the other candidates, but to congratulate the new MP for Morley and Outwood, Andrea Jenkins. Andrea, you have fought a really decent campaign, and you've done so in a very good way. And I know you'll work really hard to be the Member of Parliament for Morley and Outwood, and you'll have the support of the constituency to do that very important job. So thank you for the way in which you've conducted this campaign. I'd like to thank all of my campaign team who've worked 7 days a week for 5 years, and my agent Neil Dawson, but all of the team. It's the best campaign team, and I'm just hugely grateful. I'm just sorry we couldn't quite do enough to repeat what we did in 2010. And it's been a great honour to be the Member of Parliament for Morley and Outwood, and before that for Normanton. And I have found it a great privilege, and we've done some important things to represent individuals in times of difficulty or hardship, but also to make advances in this constituency and in Westminster. Any personal disappointment I have at this result is as nothing compared to the sense of sorrow I have at the result that Labour has achieved across the United Kingdom tonight in Scotland, but also in England and in Wales, and the sense of concern I have about the future. We will now face 5 years where questions will arise about the future of our union, about whether or not we can stay as a member of the European Union and fight for jobs and investment, whether we can make sure we secure our national health service at a time of public spending cuts. And those are real concerns to me and to many people across the United Kingdom. Even on this very difficult night, I would just like to say I've been proud to be a Labour and Cooperative Member of Parliament. And we have always been a party which has been internationalist, because we believe we've solved problems by working with other countries to solve them. We've always been a party which believed in the union because the pooling and sharing of risk which comes from our union underpins justice and fairness. We've always been the party who founded the National Health Service and will do everything we can to secure the future of the National Health Service. Even on this difficult night, I'm sure the Labour Party will emerge in the coming weeks and months more united and more determined. And in the next few years, I think more than ever, we will need in Parliament and across the country a Labour Party absolutely determined to stand up for working people in this constituency and in our country. I am confident Labour will be back. Thank you very much.
The Shadow Chancellor, Ed Balls, accepting defeat in Morley and Outwood. He said that his personal disappointment, any personal disappointment, was as nothing compared to how he feels about the defeats for Labour across the UK, not least in Scotland, and he expressed a sense of concern about the future of the country and the questions that he thinks will be raised about the future of the United Kingdom and the future of the UK's position within the European Union, issues that we've been discussing throughout the evening and through the small hours of the morning. We're expecting to hear live in the studio from the First Minister and SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon in the next wee while, but let's carry on the conversation with those on our panel. That concern that Ed Balls expresses, is he right to express concern about the future of the UK and the impact that this big block of SNP MPs might have?
Well, you'd expect him to. I'm not sure that he's really been all that engaged in the question of the constitutional future and the Scottish relationship, though he did do a bit of campaigning here. I think much more of his concern is where Labour goes next, because if you leave aside, and it's a big thing to leave aside, but leave aside the Scottish question at Westminster now, there's a question of where the parties reposition themselves. Labour has fought a campaign which was in contrast to the Tony Blair tactic of racking up enormous majorities by fighting over the centre ground, which, tactics he'd learned from Bill Clinton in the States. Ed Miliband went into this trying to put together a coalition on the left. And to put, that's where he came from. It was a sort of honest campaign. He really ignored large chunks of the centre ground. The Lib Dems, of course, would normally be occupying that kind of ground, but were fighting a very, very tough battle to justify their position in government over the past 5 years. And the Tories vacated some of the sort of liberal, social liberal centre ground because they were so worried about UKIP. Now, things have obviously turned around south of the border, this is. With UKIP, I don't know that they'll ever be quite the same threat again. I mean, they have got, was it 9% of the vote, but nevertheless, hardly any seats. And they may push through it in European elections, but given their best opportunity at a Westminster election, they really haven't pushed through, and the Tories may be much less concerned about them in future and moving into the centre ground.
And with lots of votes and very few seats, Brian Taylor, UKIP will no doubt be pressing their case for a system of proportional representation for the UK Parliament, but probably to no avail with a majority Tory government.
They can press, but when they're facing a forecast Conservative membership in the House of Commons of 328, I think the figure now is, they're going to press without much response, frankly. It's going to stay as things are, and unless it suits the major parties to change, and it would have to be the major parties together to change, I think it'll stay as things are.
The Liberal Democrats have had a rotten night, Charlie, Jeffrey, in Scotland and across the UK. Douglas Fraser was hinting, reading into what Nick Clegg has said overnight, suggesting that he might stand down as party leader. Do you think that's likely?
I think it would be quite unlikely to see a different outcome. This is the man who took the Lib Dems to the heights that we saw in those leaders' debates before the last election. To this performance, we're looking at 8 seats now. 8 seats from 57. This is not a position where you can continue as leader, is it?
Well, we'll see. Nick Clegg, no doubt, will be speaking later in the day, as will Ed Miliband, David Cameron. And right now, we can hear from the leader of the SNP, the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon's in the studio. Morning to you.
Good morning.
Congratulations again on your wins overnight. 56 of the 59 seats in Scotland. Scotland's spoken. What's it said?
Well, I think Scotland has voted for a louder voice in Westminster, has voted for change, has very clearly voted against continued austerity. These are the issues that we put at the heart of the campaign. Scotland has voted overwhelmingly to endorse these positions, so they're the issues we now take to the heart of the Westminster agenda.
And you take it to a Westminster Parliament which is going to have a majority of Conservative MPs, a majority Conservative government. That wasn't the scenario you said you were planning for.
Well, it's not the scenario I wanted. I mean, I don't think I could have been clearer that I wanted to see the back of David Cameron in a Conservative government, but Labour hasn't managed to beat the Conservatives in England. You know, we've just seen the Shadow Chancellor lose his seat. Labour haven't been strong enough to beat the Conservatives. They haven't performed as well as Labour said and predicted that they would do. But given that we are facing, unfortunately, another Conservative government, it's all the more important, in my view, that we've got a strong team of SNP MPs standing up for Scotland. But because one thing is absolutely certain, the government at Westminster cannot ignore what has happened in Scotland. People have voted overwhelmingly for Scotland's voice to be heard and for an end to austerity.
Well, that's not a policy platform that David Cameron stood on, and perhaps it's a policy change that he is unlikely to make as the head of a majority government. Let me ask you this, though. What is it that you want in terms of Scotland's relationship with the United Kingdom from this government to avoid there being another referendum on independence?
I've said throughout this campaign, I've said it to you many times, I've said it to every broadcaster and journalist, this election wasn't about independence, so I don't take any of the votes that were cast for the SNP yesterday as votes for independence. They were votes to make Scotland's voice heard more loudly. Now, we will go to Westminster and seek to ensure that Westminster governments can't ignore Scotland, that they can't simply push aside the things that were voted for in Scotland yesterday. There has been an overwhelming vote for change in Scotland, and our 56 MPs will carry that message to the heart of Westminster.
And what's your bottom line in terms of increased powers for the Scottish Parliament?
We set that out in our manifesto. We want, firstly, the Smith Commission powers to be moved ahead quickly, but we want them to be strengthened. We've set out that we want to see priority powers over employment, over things like the minimum wage, over welfare devolved as quickly as possible to the Scottish Parliament, because that is what then gives us the ability to grow our economy faster and grow the revenues of our country. And these will be the arguments that we take to the House of Commons. But when I published the SNP manifesto, 3 weeks ago now, I said very explicitly that ending austerity was our #1 priority. Now, I accept that we are looking as if we've got a majority Conservative government, but nevertheless, that's what Scotland voted for yesterday, and it's what the SNP will champion in the House of Commons.
You, as a party, used to mock Labour when they had 50 Scottish MPs and they were up against a Conservative government. You called them the feeble 50. Might your 56 be just as feeble against a majority Conservative government?
The reason we criticised Labour when they were in that position is that they didn't stand up to the Conservatives all too often, and I think this is one of the things that has resulted in Scotland losing faith with the Scottish Labour Party. Very often MPs were elected, went to Westminster and were rarely heard of again. That will not be the case for the 56 MPs that were elected yesterday. They were elected on a clear promise to stand up for Scotland and make our voice heard, and that's exactly what we will do.
Well, I gather that you will be in London over the next day or so for VE Day commemorations. Any chance you might see David Cameron and start your conversations with him there?
My principal reason, only reason for being in London today is to represent the Scottish Government at the VE Day commemorations, and that's what I will do. I'm looking forward then to coming back to Scotland to meet up with our 56 MPs and start to consider how we do genuinely make Scotland's voice heard.
But you'll be seeking an early meeting with the Prime Minister, will you?
Of course, once there is a new Prime Minister in place, as First Minister, let alone as leader of the SNP, I want to make sure that Scotland's interests are communicated very loudly to him.
OK, Nicola Sturgeon, SNP leader and First Minister, thank you very much indeed. Now, it's been a long night and some very disappointed faces as political careers were brought to a crushing end. That's democracy for you, and here are some characters who've not had the happiest of times over the past few hours.
Somebody told me, get over it. It's like water under bridges that have already burned. They say it gets better, it gets easier. The memories start to fade, and sad songs that always play you start to hate. Do you remember the days we used to spend? Memory so strong it keeps me from moving on. If I could go back and take our worst days, and our worst days are better than loneliness. London Bridge is falling down.
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 Hey Laura, it's me. It's like water under bridges that have already burned.
Some of those who've lost their seats in this election, and it was Tam Dalyell who said there was nothing as X as an ex-MP. There's certainly going to be a lot of ex-MPs from Scotland seeking alternative work. What do you do after a career in the House of Commons, do you think, Kevin McKenna?
Well, I suspect a few of them will have made enough connections in industry and business connections not to have to worry too much. Although speaking as a Scot who's very interested in politics, we have lost some very able politicians, no matter which side of the political divide you come from. I'm thinking chiefly of people like Tom Greatrix and Greg McClymont and Douglas Alexander. And I would hope that 2 or 3 of them would still remain in politics and may even want to kickstart their career in Holyrood.
Well, it's a year until the next Holyrood election. I think the campaign might already have started, maybe even while this programme has been on air. We'll see what they decide to do. Let's catch up once again, though, with Brian Taylor with news of the latest forecast for the final outcome. Brian.
Thanks, Glenn. Of course, this is what we're doing here again, is putting in the many results. We're nearly there, indeed, in terms of a total into the exit poll that we gave you right at the beginning. That exit poll looking more and more accurate. Let's move across here towards the David Cameron and Ed Miliband. There's the forecast for David Cameron's party, 328. If he gets that, and he looks like getting it, it's an overall majority. A straightforward majority in the House of Commons is 326, but there's the Speaker to take account of. There's the fact that the Sinn Féin members don't turn up because they don't take the oath, and so that is a working majority for David Cameron, an overall working majority. It's tight, it's narrow, he could face challenges from Eurosceptic backbenchers, but you know what? It's better than the next guy. He's on 235, we reckon it's a forecast for Ed Miliband, nowhere near the amount that he needs to gain power. And next to that, Nicola Sturgeon, she was in the studio a few seconds ago. That's not as a forecast, that's the outcome in Scotland. 56 MPs for the SNP, a quite staggering result, extraordinary victory for the SNP in Scotland, winning a majority of the popular vote, winning massively most of the MPs in the contest here tonight. If Nicola Sturgeon's happy, this guy next to her isn't, Nick Clegg. We're forecasting 8 MPs from the Liberal Democrats, way down, below even the 10 at which Paddy Ashdown said he would eat his hat. Actually, what's been forgotten is that Alistair Campbell said he would eat his kilt if the Labour forecast was right. You know what? It was. Let's move along again, and there's enough final couple of ones to bring into play for you. Nigel Farage, 1 seat, we reckon, and for the Greens also 1 seat. Let's go back along to the end, though. Quick reminder of the position that we have. Here we are. David Cameron, we're forecasting 328 seats. An overall majority for the Conservatives, Glenn.
And we're just hearing from Downing Street that David Cameron will leave for Buckingham Palace at 12:30 to see the Queen, and then is expected back in Downing Street by 1, where he'll make a fuller statement on the outcome of the general election. And I guess he also has to move fairly quickly, Douglas Fraser, because Parliament is soon back up and running, and there'll be an expectation of a Conservative programme for government, a Queen's speech. Well,
in fact, it was quite controversial he was delaying as long as he did, until the 18th of May, because I think there was an expectation there may be a lot of horse trading with a hung Parliament, so he was giving himself a bit of time by delaying until the 18th of May to get the first sitting of Parliament. This gives him time to get his cabinet in place. Intriguingly, there's been a suggestion from the businessman Sir Tom Hunter, who's not actually an SNP supporter, I don't think, but he has suggested that Alex Salmond should be the Secretary of State for Scotland inside a Conservative cabinet.
And does he do that with his tongue firmly lodged in his cheek or not?
I suggest it with my tongue firmly in the cheek. I'm not sure how serious he is, but in that Nicola Sturgeon's extended the hand of friendship to the rest of the UK. This is suggested by one of Scotland's leading businessmen is one way that that David Cameron could respond. But he also, I mean, there's a lot involved in setting setting a new government in place in terms of a big ministerial team and getting his priorities set out in a way he didn't actually expect to be in a position to do.
Well, I suppose it's clear that the current Secretary of State for Scotland, the Liberal Democrat Alistair Carmichael, won't hold the post for much longer, and perhaps as the only Conservative MP elected, David Mundell is the likely contender for that job. He was thought likely to get it the last time, except that the Conservatives didn't win outright. But given that the Conservatives do have this overall majority, Stuart Hosey, Deputy Leader of the SNP, welcome along. What leverage will the SNP actually have with a government that you spent the entire campaign wishing out of office?
I think this is really quite important. 56 out of 59 MPs is a lot of clout. 56 from one country, one nation, Scotland, is a huge amount of clout. When you consider Labour, Liberal, Tory parties have one member of Parliament each from Scotland, the question of legitimacy comes up very, very quickly. And I suspect that the Tory government, if that's what we get, an incoming Tory government, will probably want to respond to the fact of this overwhelming victory for the Scottish National Party in Scotland this election. And I think it will be intriguing to see what they actually bring forward.
Does David Cameron have the legitimacy to govern the whole of the United Kingdom, including Scotland, where, as we've just been discussing, the party has one MP?
Well, we've heard for the last 2 weeks all this talk in England that it would be illegitimate of the Scottish National Party to have a say in the running of matters outside of Scotland.
But now, obviously, for you to make that argument that that would be legitimate, you more or less have to accept that in the UK system, the Conservatives can govern all of the UK if they have a majority.
The point I'm making is we've had 2 months of this stuff, some of it quite close to the bone in terms of the anti-Scottish nature of it. So, are they going to turn around now, having delivered that kind of venom in parts, and say, well, we've got one MP in David Mundell, and we're just going to do whatever we want to Scotland? That would ignore the political reality of the victory the Scottish National Party has just won. So it's a very interesting question. It's one of those hurdles that's going to have to be overcome, but I don't think it can be business as usual.
And Kevin McKenna, during the campaign, the Conservatives in England warned repeatedly and loudly against a Labour government potentially being propped up by the SNP. In your assessment, do you think that's been an effective campaign tactic in England? And as a knock-on consequence, has it actually boosted the SNP in Scotland?
It's a very good question. You could, of course, argue that because of the outcome for the Conservatives that tactic worked in England. But the reality of that, along with the SNP landslide in Scotland, is that the two countries have never been more divided. And there's an anomaly in the Conservatives' approach, and they're actually going to have to look at this, because during the independence referendum campaign, the Conservatives were holding out the hand of friendship to Scotland, saying the Union is nothing without you, we love you, you're an integral part of our lives, we're bound socially, with family ties, culturally, we fought wars together. And then the tone changed in the last few weeks, as Stuart said, of the general election, where it was they were questioning the legitimacy of democratically elected SNP MPs in a government dominated by a party of the Union. If they really do value the Union, they will have to watch their tone and their step in how they negotiate with the SNP.
I think it's worth noting that it appeared to work. The evidence was the Tories, and they were doing a lot of background focus group work on this, they were using it very hard in constituencies which mattered to them, and they clearly have targeted their vote quite successfully in yesterday's result. And if you judge Ed Miliband's response in the question time encounter that he had, which he went somewhat over the top in terms of Labour not wanting to do any deals with the SNP, Labour knew it was having an effect as well down south.
That's why they had to respond so strongly. I want to come back to you all in just a moment, but let's get more reaction to this extraordinary general election from morning commuters at Glasgow Central and our reporter Keradine Idrissa.
First of all, do you mind if I ask you how you voted?
Yes, I voted for SNP.
So you've had a fantastic night. Massive gains for the SNP. Your thoughts?
It's very interesting. It looks like, especially I've only seen the early, obviously results at the moment. It's interesting to see how the Conservatives could actually come out in the lead. So that'll be interesting just to see how the SNP do down there. So from that point of view, it could be a very interesting year. So I think anybody I've spoke to certainly is going to find it interesting.
Absolutely, and in terms of the 59 Scottish seats, 56 I think for the SNP, and then one each for Labour, Conservative, Liberal Democrats. I mean, it's just completely redrawn the Scottish political map.
It is, and I would think that politicians down south would certainly have to bear that in mind, because that certainly is, you could argue that's a mandate of sorts, but what it means I'm not too sure.
And of course, it looks like as well David Cameron will be able to form the next government. as things stand?
Yeah, it looks like who he's going to have to share power with, because I don't know if he has an overall majority at the moment.
I think he might now be able just about to get over the line, yes.
Well, that would be an interesting scenario, because you'll have Scotland with almost totally SNP, and the UK, the rest of the UK, voting in other directions. So one would almost imply that the split is happening as we speak in many ways.
And do you think this means that there's going to be another referendum coming soon? Would you welcome that? What's your feeling there?
I would think it's more likely there will be another referendum now, only for the fact is that you could argue that it's an unrepresentative government of the UK. I would be interested in that from that point of view.
And would you yourself want one? I get so soon again?
I would be interested in having another, especially if we're going to go, if there's the referendum on the EU. If the vote goes against remaining in the EU, then I think Scotland should have another referendum. And I think from the last poll that was taken, I think on the potential EU membership, I think the vast majority of the population down the UK would vote against being a member. So from that point of view, I would say a referendum is very likely.
Thank you very much.
OK, and our reporter Keradine Idizan reporting there, meeting commuters at Glasgow Central. From Glasgow, let's go to London, to Downing Street. Our Westminster correspondent David Porter is there for us. And how's the day shaping up as David Cameron prepares to move from the head of a coalition government to being the head of a Conservative government with an overall majority?
Glenn, we are starting to get more details about how the day here at Downing Street is going to unfold. About an hour ago, David Cameron arrived back at Downing Street with his wife Samantha. He's now meeting staff here. He's also getting himself reacquainted with his family, who he hasn't seen an awful lot of in the last few days. We are told by Downing Street that he will leave here at 12:30 to go to Buckingham Palace for an audience with the Queen. Now, he doesn't need to do this because he is still Prime Minister and he's going to continue as Prime Minister. It is, I suppose, as much as anything, a courtesy call. She was always due to come back to London today because of the VE Day celebrations later on this afternoon, but she will now see him at about 12:30 this afternoon. Then Mr Cameron will return to Downing Street. They will put a lectern up behind me, and he will, in effect, give his address to the nation when he will explain what he wants to do in his second term as Prime Minister. And I think one of the questions he is going to address is the whole question of the Union, what he now does now there is that block of 56 SNP MPs. If things move quickly this afternoon, we may even find that we have some cabinet appointments as well. So it is going to be a busy day inside and outside here in Downing Street.
And any sense of how the Conservative government might handle the future of the United Kingdom in light of these results?
We're not getting that at the moment, but I expect we will get more information on that as the day goes out, and we'll get some idea of their thinking. It was noticeable in the brief statement that David Cameron made following his being returned in his constituency at Witney, that he mentioned that he wanted to get the Conservatives back to one nation Toryism. But he has to address this question about the future of the Union, indeed the future of the constitutional settlement with Scotland and with the rest of the UK. Do we go down a more federal structure? He did say in that statement that he wanted to bring forward very quickly the extra powers to Scotland. There is all-party agreement from the Unionist parties on that. That was agreed after the publication of the Smith Commission. But I think now, bearing in mind what has happened in Scotland, the huge block of SNP MPs, there will be people saying this has to go further. That is going to be one of the first things in his in-tray.
David Porter, our Westminster correspondent, thanks very much indeed for joining us live from Downing Street. Let's get final thoughts from those of us on our panel as this part of the BBC's coverage of General Election 2015 draws to a close. Kevin McKenna, what's your overriding memory of this election, or at least what do you think it will be once you get the chance to reflect?
I think the wholesale number of very able MPs who have disappeared and have gone from Scottish, perhaps UK public life, but also the verve and the excitement of, you know, witnessing a huge slice, a unique slice of Scottish history, because this is unprecedented. This is even more unique than the referendum. No one expected this sort of outcome.
A thumping defeat for Labour in Scotland, down to just one MP. Is there a way back, or is this a permanent shift in Scottish politics, do you think?
Well, we've got a democratic revolution has taken place. And I think that there are challenges for the winners and the losers. The winners have to define what this means. And I think we've heard today from the First Minister, they're still struggling to express that in the context of a majority Conservative government. But clearly for the losers, this is such a sharp jolt that they can't avoid but take a really, really serious look at themselves. They can't afford to do what the Conservatives did, which is to take the best part of 2 decades to try to turn themselves around and try lots of different things. Labour just has to start from scratch again, I think, in Scotland. This has been a long time coming. They all know there were problems that have built up over time. Society has changed and they need to address them too. And the same goes for the Liberal Democrats in Scotland. I mean, they've been a big player in rural Scotland for quite a while.
It's certainly been the SNP's night in Scotland. Stuart Hosey, be honest, did you ever think when you entered SNP politics that you would see a day like this?
33 years ago, if we got a poll that was in double figures, it was an amazing achievement. When we were picking up 2 or 3 MPs, holding Winnie's seat in Europe, and having a couple of dozen councillors. So the idea today that you have a majority Holyrood government, a record number of SNP councillors, you've got 2 MEPs and now 56 MPs. To be brutally honest, 33 years ago, no, this would be beyond everyone's wildest dreams. But it's a very good dream, and I'm happy it's happened.
Well, SNP have won this huge majority in Scotland. Conservatives have won a majority in the United Kingdom as a whole, albeit with just the 1 Scottish seat. Whatever happened to all the talk of a hung parliament, Charlie Jeffrey?
Yeah, we lost that quite quickly last night, didn't we? 56 out of 59 for the SNP here. The Conservative Party in England, 315 out of 533 seats. We have 2 national majority parties here. I think the big question in the next period is whether those 2 national majority parties coming together are a recipe for conflict on national lines, or perhaps the basis for an accommodation across those national lines.
Where do you think, Brian Taylor, the story goes from here?
I think the story has to go in terms of a response to this yell from Scotland for attention to be paid to the Scottish dimension. Do I think it is a particular demand for particular powers to be devolved to Holyrood? No, I don't. Do I think it's a particular objection to an austerity programme advanced by the Conservative government? No, I don't. But I do think it is a demand for Scotland's attention to be heeded. If you consider the Labour Party, Labour Party, they have now found themselves in the same situation as the Conservatives. The Conservatives lost the position where they were seen as other than Scottish. Right now, the Labour Party in Scotland are seen as other than Scottish by the Scottish people.
Is there a way back, briefly, Brian?
There is a way back, but for the Labour Party and the Conservatives, they have to address the needs of the people of Scotland and, above all, the concerns of the people of Scotland just to be addressed, to be paid heed to within the UK position.
OK, well, thanks to Brian Taylor, Charlie Jeffrey and all our guests at the end of an extraordinary night for Scotland and for the whole of the United Kingdom. Just to recap on the main headlines, the Prime Minister, David Cameron, remains in office and is preparing to head for Buckingham Palace to see the Queen as he prepares to form a majority government for the Conservative Party and to deal with the fallout of the election in Scotland, where the SNP have won 56 of the 59 seats. Let's take a look back on some of the big moments of an extraordinary election.
I've been waiting all night for you to tell me what you want. Tell me that you need me. I've been waiting all night for you to, tell me what you want, yeah. I've been waiting all night for you to tell me what you want. Tell me that you need me. I've been waiting all night for you to, tell me what you want, yeah. I've been waiting all night.
that Mary Black is duly elected as Member of Parliament for the Paisley and Renfrewshire South constituency. Thank you.
Mr Alexander, what's gone wrong for Labour tonight?
Kirsten Francis Oswald, Scottish National Party, 23,030.
Natalie McGarry, Scottish National Party, 24,100.
John Nicholson is elected to serve in the United Kingdom Parliament as the member for the Eastern Bartonshire County constituency. Thank you.
Alistair Carmichael is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the Orkney and Shetland constituency.
I do hereby declare that the said John Douglas Wilson Carswell is duly elected as Member of Parliament for the Clacton constituency. Thank you.
And I hereby declare that the said Boris Johnson is duly elected.
I hereby declare that the said Tanya Wynne Mathias is duly elected as Member of Parliament for the Twickenham constituency.
Nick Clegg has been duly elected. Thank you.
Miliband Ed, Labour Party, 20,708 votes.
Jenkins Andrea Marie, the Conservative Party candidate, 18,776.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very fond of political history. And tonight, if nothing else, we can all consider and reflect in years to come, perhaps tell our grandchildren, we were there the night of the long skiing doos.
The process of rebuilding the Labour Party has got to start with an examination of both personnel and ideas, and therefore Jim has obviously got to do the honourable thing and resign.
I give public notice that Drew Henry is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the Inverness, Nairn, Badenoch and Strathspey constituency.
I hereby declare that Callum Kerr has been duly elected to serve in the United Kingdom Parliament.
I want my party, and I hope a government I would like to lead, to reclaim a mantle that we should never have lost, the mantle of one nation, one United Kingdom.
Scotland has asked to speak with a united voice. That voice will be made clearly for Scotland in the next Westminster Parliament. Thank you very much indeed.